Bring the ship up to broadcast depth. We're going in.
Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Irrational Mail. I'm your host, Rollo Tomassi. Today we're going to be talking about the 80-20 rule. This is something that has been a part of sort of red pill awareness for a very long time. So stick around. Got some new tricks to show you.
All right then.
How's it going? Hey, what's going on, guys? Boy, a lot of people in the chat today already. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. This is awesome. Yes, it's the Brett Michaels show. No. What was it? The Rock of Love? That's where I took the, everybody's looking at the thumbnail and yes, I actually used a real rock star. I'm sorry. Well, I mean, what's your definition of rock star? So I just to get down to a few things here. I wanted to, I'm probably going to do a show very soon, just based on some emails that I have been receiving, and I really want to address those. I know I said I was going to do it last Sunday, but then it was Father's Day, so I didn't want to disappoint for Father's Day. And then today I was presented with some interesting, I guess, articles and data sets, new data sets, numbers. That should be the subtitle of today's show is numbers. Who's got the numbers? I'm looking at an article on Quillette, which is, for me, I used to like Quillette, but now I'm kind of like, it's kind of hit or miss. It seems a little bit more, leans a little more onto the liberal side. But this actual, I know it's supposed to be very well, fair and balanced, right? And I get that. And I do follow Claire. I know she's the one that runs Quillette. I have seen, I like it because it's a little bit more science-based. Some of it is anyways. Certainly more so than Psychology Today. Psychology Today has jumped the shark. It jumped the shark probably back in like 2017, 2018. I kind of gave up on Psychology Today as a reliable kind of aggregate, let's just say, of psychological, essays and things like that. So unless it's coming from like God Sod or someone that I kind of recognize already, I have to take Psychology Today with sort of a grain of salt, because a lot of it is, I don't call it red meat, but it's certainly clickbait. Some of it is clickbait. And it's sort of a clearinghouse, let's just say, of I guess psychology bloggers or psychologists who decided that they want to in some way put out essays and, put something out there. This is an interesting, that's an interesting start to today's topic, I think, too, because one thing that I have written about in the past and is features prominently in book 4 right now is I've said that we are presently in a new age of enlightenment. And that has its advantages and it has its drawbacks right now. And it's very similar. Like I make this comparison in the introduction of book 4, that is very similar to what happened when the Gutenberg press came out and like movable type and dissemination of mass. It was really honestly, I think and this is me talking, I think the Gutenberg press, way back in, what was it, the early or late 1400s, early 1500s, somewhere around there, was, it was a turning point, I think, for human beings, because now we could disseminate mass media. It was the beginning of mass media. And the reason I say that is because as a sort of I also have an art degree, right? I've been doing design for a very long time, typography. I'm old school when it comes to stuff like that, because I was when I was coming out, when I just started my career as a graphic designer and an art director and all that good stuff, I was on the cusp of everybody just sort of giving up on the old way, like the analog ways of doing things, and coming into digital, and seeing how like computers and it was called desktop publishing, right? How you could on a Mac at that time, produce a newspaper if you wanted to. It was pagination and all this new stuff that if you were part of the old guard, you kind of had to relearn because your industry was dying. And a lot of other industries died along with that. But like, I think it first hit graphic design and certainly print media, because that came before the internet. And then, of course, what happened after that is, we had the internet comes out, and then we have social media, and we have this really rapid advancement, I think, of disseminating more information, much like the Gutenberg press back in the Renaissance period, right? Early Renaissance. And as a result of that, there was a lot of turmoil that happened as historians know. A lot of crazy stuff happened in the wake of that. Of course, it was the Protestant Reformation, and a lot of wars and a lot of things happened because people had access to more information from the tree of knowledge, right? But so as a result, I see sort of the internet doing the same thing right now. And when we hit about year 2000, maybe a little bit after that, that's when, sort of like the rise of the pickup artists, right? It was the time for forums. Forums were a big thing. I remember blogs weren't even, blogs were probably around. Maybe I just wasn't aware of them. I didn't start the Rational Mail until 2011, but I probably could have started it around 2009 and got in a little bit early. I know Dalrock was like, he might've been like 8 months or a year ahead of me. He might've been 2010. And like I said, I was kind of reluctant to move into doing blogging. And I moved away from sort of being a moderator at SoSuave to being, my own blogger and writing about what I wanted to write about. And, as a result of that, it's disseminating information. And that's really where we're going today, because the 80-20 rule is something that happened, or is something that was sort of picked out by the early pickup artists. And what it was sort of this early, I don't know, like maybe it was just sort of this instinctive awareness that 80% of guys were AFCs, right? They were average frustrated chumps. And we didn't even call them betas back then, because beta wasn't really something, it wasn't a term that was really used all that much. I don't think beta, alpha and beta, I guess alpha came in a little earlier than that, but alpha and beta, like what we call alpha and beta, or what we use as sort of terminology. Again, these are abstracts. These aren't like, scientific designations for human beings. Those terms weren't something that we use. I used to use, if you read the very first, like the first few chapters, I say like the first third of the Rational Mail, which was published in 2013, and a lot of those essays and a lot of the chapters that turned into essay, or the essays that turned into chapters, were from the early days. And so I use terms, and I still occasionally do. I use the term average frustrated chump, which was really the, equivalent of the time of a beta. Like, oh, you're being beta, you're being blue pill. And really in the early days, we didn't even use blue pill all that much. Or red pill all that much. It was just, we talked about the matrix and getting unplugged and sort of becoming aware of all this stuff. And one of the things that was sort of an instinctual awareness, I think, at that time, was that 80% of the guys were, or say a majority, maybe we didn't actually apply a number to it at that point, but we realized that a majority of guys tend to be on the beta AFC side of the equation. And I think it might have been Mystery, early pickup artist Mystery. Eric Markovich, I think is his real name, pointed out that he said something like this. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, like, was it 20% of guys are doing 80% of the banging, right? Or hitting it with 80% of the girls. And that always kind of stuck with me, because I was already familiar with the Pareto principle at that time. And the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule. That's where we get 80-20, or we get I just say comparison, because there's a lot of, I don't want to say nuance, but there's a lot of I guess, difference, or there's a lot of distinction that kind of gets lost when guys say, well, 80-20, because today I hear guys use this all the time. They'll say, well, I'll use this myself, right? I have said like the majority of guys are betas and they're the 80%ers, right? They're the guys that are sort of selected out, that aren't the ones that women are naturally attracted to, naturally aroused by, and they tend to lean towards higher extremes. And that's really the basis of like the fundamental kind of rudimentary basis of hypergamy, which is, what is it? 80%. What somebody said this, 80% of women go for 20% of the guys. And that's wrong. That is sort of an invention, I think, of the last like 3 years, that I think is sort of a concoction of black pill / MGTOW. And it's almost like this verification, or if it's like an affirmation, I think, of sort of this hopelessness. Well, I'm in the 80%, so I'm never going to get a girlfriend. I'm never going to bang. Oh, I can't believe it. Blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, if you want to feel sorry for yourself and you want to like sort of wallow in your nihilism, that's one thing. And then if you have numbers to apply to it, well, then see, it's real. There it is, black and white, plus and minus. Well, the problem with that is it's actually worse than they're making it. It's actually, if you really want to feel bad, you really want to commiserate, here's the reality of it. 100% of women are interested in the top 20% of guys, not 80%. It's not the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule applies to men, really. 80% of men are, actually, it's probably more than that. I know that people are going to fight me on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it here right at the beginning. A lot of guys will say, well, aren't we at 85 or aren't we at 90-10? Because when I was doing the sort of homework for this video, I was looking at like what other guys had done. And of course, everybody's talking about, well, 80-20 is now 90-10. I guess I can understand why, because you can make things, oh, damn, thanks, Chris. If you can make things, sound worse, again, numbers, if you can make things sound worse with numbers, that's red meat for the red pill. So actually, I have to get to this because this is too good. Thank you, Eric. He says, this is 100% all yours. Great work. Thank you. I hear the black pill guys using 80-20 rule all the time as a fallback to defend their point of view. Yeah, I do. I see that as well. And what did you put on here? Taryn, this is on topic, so I'm going to say it here. Do you agree with 20% Chads operating as Eskimo brothers in the sexual marketplace? I don't know what Eskimo brothers is. It sounds kind of racial, but... we'll get to that actually, if that's what you meant. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. I think that the 90-10 rule is something that is sort of, again, it's sort of this, it's this creation, I think, that's happened really in the last like 3 years, certainly 2017, I think is when I started hearing it. Because we would like to think that things are worse off than they are. You're going to make a bigger impact with people, the more negative your analysis is, really. And that's really kind of an unfortunate part of like sort of human nature, because we want conflict. We like to think that we're overcoming conflict. We like to think that we have some sort of, like, if you look at like most like classic literature or classic stories and things like that, it's always, overcoming adversity. And when you see something like that, it sticks with you that much more. Nobody wants to talk about or hear about the guy who has the perfect life and has never had a problem in his life. That doesn't make for a story. It's the guy who overcomes adversity. And the reason for that is because negativity and sort of the negative outcomes of our attempts to sort of overcome them tend to stick with us more than the positive outcomes. And I can also use a red pill analogy for this. And I know I'm using analogy, but I can do that here on my show. Is that you tend to learn more from your failures and your rejections than you do from your successes. So you're not going to see, in certain communities, you're not going to see guys going, hey, I tried this and it really worked and it was great. And you're not going to, unless it's affirming sort of a negative, then you're just people kind of just blow you off because they don't want to hear about the guy who has a great life and made a lot of money and like Dan Blitzerian is, and I know I use him a lot. Dan Blitzerian like gets more hate than he gets love. Especially, you go look at Dan Blitzerian cannot post a 1-sentence tweet on Twitter without having dozens and hundreds of guys going, yeah, well, you got all this money from your dad or whatever. And it could be just completely random. You know, it doesn't even have to be a coherent sentence, and people will just pile on because that's, you know, that's what they want to do. That's more, I think they get a rise out of that more than anything else. But that's why you see the 90-10 rule, because it's something that's even more so, well, they got 80-20 wrong. It's 90-10 actually. So what is this now? Okay, because I'm not familiar with this, so I'm going to stop really quickly here. A man who's Eskimo brothers with another man means they slept with the same woman. Oh, I see what you're saying. That's funny. Yeah, Eskimo brothers. Where the hell did that come from? Why didn't you just say poly, man? I mean, that's pretty much the same shit. So yeah, well, I mean, I can get to that. We'll get to that. Don't worry about it. So when it comes to the 80-20 rule, back in the day, let's just say, a lot of the early PUAs realized this because probably most of the guys that they were trying to, you know, help, or who were in sort of their projects or in their, you know, taking their classes and stuff, were obviously, I mean, you could see this in RSD today, and RSD doesn't, Real Social Dynamics doesn't even do PUA all that much anymore. I know they have a few instructors, but they're really all about sort of like the Tony Robbins positivity grift right now. But back in the day, they had a lot of guys in a lot of seminars and a lot of, you know, a lot of convention rooms. And those were the 80%ers because that's their audience. Those are the people who want to learn how to not be an 80%er and how to sort of cure their sexlessness, how to solve their reproductive problem. And I wanted to bring that up also in the beginning of this show, because when I state reproductive problem, what I'm saying there is that every human being, whether male, female, whatever, we have a drive towards reproduction. Obviously, we want to have sex. That's why PUA started. That's why Red Pill started, because we wanted to figure it out. Now we've gone on and we've extrapolated that and gone into bigger and better things, as well as learning how to have sex, or learning how best to interact with the opposite sex in the, you know, with the purpose of reproducing. Right. So that's the reproductive problem. And for women and men, that reproductive problem is approached differently. It's approached with different techniques, right? Different mating strategies. I've talked about that a lot. Hypergamy, of course, is women's mating strategy. Men's tends to be unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. That's men's innate, natural way of solving his reproductive problem. It's usually scattershot, right? It's usually spread the seed. And then, you know, if you find one, you get locked down, or you catch feelings for a girl or whatever like that, then maybe you get parentally invested. But if we look at things from a naturalistic kind of perspective and a Darwinian perspective, if you like, it's unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. And the more powerful, the more alpha, the more influential, the stronger, the fitter, the smarter guys in the tribe had access to more women. And we still see sort of reflections of that today. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from the Quillette article that I was made aware of this morning. And I thought this would be a good one because this is sort of almost like Red Pill 101. When I put like Red Pill lessons on there, you're probably going to get some old school lesson that a lot of people may or may not be aware of. So when the 80-20 rule was a thing, like I said, it was really kind of like this catch-all kind of understanding that there's a 20%. I think really when we talk about the 80%ers, we don't really focus enough on the 20% of guys. I think it's a pretty much foregone conclusion that 80% of guys, or even higher than that, let's just say 85. I'm not going to go 90 just yet. But I know statistically, and these are statistics that have come out during the last decade. So statistically, we have the access to information, right? Remember what I said, we're in the age of the new enlightenment. We have access to information that we never had access to before. And part of that is because we have the internet and because we have online dating, we can track trends and we can track likes, and we can track swipe left, swipe right, connections, who responded to who. And whether that's, in the case that we're going to talk about today, it's going to be like online dating. It'll be Tinder. I forget the other one. Hinge. That's what it is. Hinge. Hinge. But you can also make comparisons to, Match.com, OkCupid. And OkCupid is really where I want to start because OkCupid, and I think the founder, the guy he's either the starter or started OkCupid, or he's the guy who does the data collection for OkCupid. And I think his last name's Rudd. I'm not really sure. But he produced a book, a really great book. And it came out, I think, in 2015, maybe 2016. And it was called Dataclysm. And again, part of my reading lists, like people ask me, like, what books would you put on? I would definitely put Dataclysm on my reading list because it's statistically, it will show you certain things that will be confirmations of some things and disqualifications of others. But Dataclysm is interesting, and I think it's sort of a groundbreaking book. And also, I would be remiss if I did not also mention Carl from Black Label Logic, who's a friend of mine, who's also a participant. He's one of the panelists on Rule Zero with us. Carl has two great books. He has Gendernomics 1 and Gendernomics 2. And in those books, he talks about the 80-20 rule. In fact, that's one of the things I think that really got me reading his stuff and really introduced me to Carl, not his real name, but Black Label Logic, was reading his statistics. He's a good statistician. So if you're looking for numbers, and I don't care what franchise of the manosphere you're from, you owe it to yourself really to kind of go look at Gendernomics, because Gendernomics will explain, I think, not just the sexual marketplace, but also how the global economic marketplace influences the sexual marketplace as well. And that's why I thought this was an interesting, like the Quillette article, I thought this was interesting because it goes to a similar place that really the red pill's been going to since 2002, and certainly where Dataclysm already went, and certainly where Gendernomics had already went. And the numbers are something that I think that a lot of people think that it's gloom and doom, right? Like doom gloomer. Okay, hey, I see you. Yeah, okay, there's your attention, brother. But why? Why is it that those numbers feed into that nihilism and feed into that despondency, rather than saying, okay, I know the game. How can I be better? How can I game it? Right? How can I make myself better? How can I be a better competitor because I know these things? And I'm going to save that for the end of the show a little bit here. But when it comes to the 80-20 rule, this is something that I think people instinctually understand. So prior to us even being on, prior to, formalized pickup, prior to formalized, game or whatever you want to call it, like back in the 90s, back in the 80s, back in the 70s, I think people sort of, understood that, women were pairing up with guys that they might not, under other circumstances, whether socioeconomic or whatever, might not have been with those guys. And that's the problem I have with this Quillette article, which I'm going to get to here in just a second, is I think up until a certain point, maybe like the mid 2000s, there was this, and I think that we're still kind of clinging to this, but there's this insistency that women are only interested in security. They're only interested in the beta buck side of hypergamy. Alpha seed, beta need, the beta provisioning, parentally invested side of hypergamy. And so where this Quillette article goes is also the same place. And this is also what I kind of take Jordan Peterson to task for, because when Jordan Peterson talks about hypergamy, and he does talk about it from the respect of like how hypergamy has sort of been redefined, or the definition's been expanded, let's just say, he only picks the side that seems safe. And that's usually where women go. Like if you're going to ask a woman, say, what is it that you look for in a guy? Like if you're foolish enough to think that you're going to get some sort of accurate information from that question, and you ask that, generally what women will tell you is what they're looking for a guy who's a long-term partner, who is the beta bucks provisioner guy, because that's usually the more socially acceptable answer. So when you say, what are you looking for in a guy? Oh, he's got to be funny, and he's got to love his mother, and he's got to be, he's got to have a good smile, and he's got to have a job, and he's got to be going places and have confidence, and and all of these sort of like esoteric kind of things that would, in the long term, benefit her in terms of security or in terms of their family security. What women won't tell you, and haven't told us for a long time until we had access to this information, is what they're really hot for and what they get off on and what they would have if The beta buck side of, like, if you were to ask a woman, let's just say in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, like, well, you know, what do you look for in a guy? She's going to tell you that what she's attracted to. And I've separated those before: arousal and attraction. Arousal is the alpha seed side. Attraction is the beta need side. So it's provisioning and security versus hot monkey sex and what is it? A mystery used to call this. It was the reproductive value versus sort of the survival value. And I'm probably butchering that. He said it in a different way, but that you get what I mean. Is there's the alpha side, the guy who's the physical specimen, the guy who has physical prowess, the guy who has dominance, the guy who has the capacity for violence, the guy who is the stereotypical Chad, right? He's the guy with the jawline and has, you know, testosterone through his looks and his attitudes and behaviors and blah, 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 blah. That's the guy she wants to have hot monkey sex with in the foam cannon party in Cancun on spring break. There you go. But if you were to ask women prior to the internet what they were looking for, they would almost uniquely focus on the long-term aspects. Like, oh, I'm really looking for a guy who's got he's boyfriend material, or he's husband material. And I've heard sociologists say this, as well as, you know, psychologists and evolutionary psychologists as well, is that it comes down to sort of the competition between the cads versus the dads. And this is something that Royce Hartiste has written about in the past, like back in like 2008, 2009, about cads versus dads. And I'll return to that. But if you were to ask women prior to having prior to our information, you know, glut that we have and understanding things a little bit better with statistics, you would find that they were all mostly going to say that that's what they were looking for, but their behavior was something that you had to be able to be sort of hyper aware of. So if you are in the clubs, or if you're at wherever you are in some sort of social, you know, engagement, let's say you're at school, you're at the library, you're at Barnes and Noble where you meet quality women, right? You're at even Bible study, right? You're wherever the girls are. Unless you're a keen observer of women's behavior, you're probably, or you listen, or you eavesdrop, or you're trying to figure out how, you know, women interact with each other, and you have some sort of, you know, curiosity about that as a guy, you're probably not going to, in this era, you're not going to find out really what it is that they're really into when it comes to hot guys. You have to be observational. You have to say, well, it seems to me like she says she wants these guys, but why does she keep going for this guy? If you go and you listen to the music of like the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, you'll find various performers, various artists have written about that. Like pretty women walking with gorillas down my street. That's a Jackson Browne song. I know I'm dating myself. I'm not really into Jackson Browne, but I do remember that song. And it was, is she really going out with him? And really what it is it's this beta guy, some would say gamma, trying to figure out why it is that the girl he wants to get with doesn't go out with him. He's the perfect dude. I don't understand this. I'm the one that she says she wants. I've asked women what it is that they want. They've told me that they want a guy who's funny and loves his mom and likes puppy dogs and wants kids and has a good job and is going places in life and blah, blah, blah. And they go and they bang the guy who's the quarterback of the football team, right? Or the guy who's just sort of like, they don't understand that. And right up until we got to the information age, to the new age of enlightenment, to the new order, we didn't have any hard, fast data on that because we couldn't really, it was something that you had to do personally. You had to take, I'm not even say like writing notes, I mean, taking mental notes. And the guys who were the good players, the guys who figured things out, and I'm not going to say I was one of those guys, but I figured things out how things would work for me. And I did that during my 20s, you know, in Hollywood, in my rock star 20s. I figured it out, but I still was clinging to sort of my blue pill idea. Like, well, you know, I'm still a nice guy. I'm still a good dude. And I'm, you know, and I love my mom. But a lot of guys never figured that out. And particularly back then, and you had to do it was like a process of just sort of living it. It was like like experiential learning. You had to figure out things on your own. And if you didn't figure those things out, then you probably made some pretty bad decisions. And a lot of guys who are in my generation and probably the generation that came after me, Generation Y, I guess, have made some pretty bad decisions because they either didn't have the curiosity or they didn't get that 80% of guys were chumps and 20% of guys were getting laid. Like we would call those guys the guys who were lucky, the guys who hit the genetic lottery, the guys who were lucky with the ladies, right? We always try to like say it's about like fate, right? It's pure luck. He got lucky. That's why we say did you get lucky last night? That's why we say that. Because most guys are beta And most guys don't understand this. I mean, maybe fewer now in this generation and after the internet. But prior to that, everybody, it was all about luck. And you will hear songs about that. I got lucky in love, whatever it is. Guys will apply sort of this mysticism or this fortune, right? And especially when you pair that up with religion or superstition or whatever, trying to figure those things out for yourself, we tend not to want to do that. We want to get easy answers. And so what do? Well, I don't know. I guess we'll never figure it out. Well, we have figured it out. And we have figured it out with hard data. And we figured it out now in 2020 after 2 decades of just 2 decades, really. And I wouldn't even say 2 decades. I would say like probably maybe 15 years or maybe 12 years of data collection. And I have if you want to look in the relevant links today, I have several articles on essays on the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule. And one of them is called the Pareto principle, and you'll see it in the relevant links. And so, what are you looking at here? Okay, we'll get back to you. If you're again, here's the rules, man. If you're going to text me or you're going to give me a super chat, if it's not on topic, I will get to it at the end of the show. So what are the numbers saying? And I think what's funny is back when I was writing the Pareto principle, back when we were just sort of hashing this out on SoSuave or on All Fast Seduction or wherever it was, people would say, you guys are misogynists. I can't believe you would say that. And there was this real hard resistance, and particularly from women, but also from guys who are sort of who are the 80%ers. They wanted to believe that what women had told them about what they were attracted to was true, right? We have to, because that's all I got, man. I just have to go with what they say, because most guys are, first of all, they're idealists, but second of all, they are deductive problem solvers. So when you are solving a problem deductively, you're trying to gather as much data as you can. Well, if you only have access to the data that you're looking for, the only access you have is other women. That's why guys will say, oh, well, I have lots of female friends and they tell me that they like this or they do this. And what happens is, of course, they go, well, A plus B plus C equals D, right? It's like, I want sex. I got to figure out how to do it. I got to ask some women. I got to poll women. It's this process of this logical, rational, and to their credit, rational process of trying to figure things out. The problem is they're getting incorrect data, or they have been for a long time until now. Until we have sort of aggregated all this, and not just on like the city of wherever you're at, but all across the world. So this is like a global consortium, right? It's a global aggregate of, well, first of all, men's experience. That's what I call the red pill, is a global aggregate of guys' experience, but it's also hard data that's being pulled now. And now we have at least 10, maybe 12 years of it. So if you go and you look at things like, whatever your stance on porn is right now, if you want to go to Pornhub's blog, it's not necessarily porn, but it is all stats. And it will show you what guys are looking at, what women are looking at, when they looked at it, what they're into, what's the trends, those kinds of things. We take that for granted right now. We never had access to that. We never had access to that kind of data before. And we just kind of like, oh, well, I guess people are into this kind of stuff, and we don't realize just how significant that new data is. Well, that's one part. That's just pornography habits. Usually it's just guys jerking off, right? It's guys who are, unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. Well, when guys have that, what do they look at? Well, we got all the data. We got the data right here. In fact, that's why I keep coming back to that when I talk about men's innate sexual strategy. I always tag onto that. If you don't believe me, look at pornography. Why is it so ubiquitous right now? Well, that's why. And if you believe that, then you owe it to yourself to go and look at what it is that guys are into, because that tells you a lot of it. It opens you. I'm a connector of dots, so it opens you up to a lot of other questions, but also a lot of other clues to things that you might have been wondering about. So when we say, when you constantly hear women saying, men only want those unrealistic beauty queen. They want Barbie dolls with big boobs and blonde hair and blue eyes and pornography, and they want them to, do all these sexual acrobatics. And I just can't do that. I'm just not like that. How come? It's society. Society is programming these guys to do that. And it's like, if you go and you look at the data, that's not true. Men have a variety. Men will pretty much bang anything. Let's just be honest, okay? I don't care if you're pasty white or skinny or like emaciated skinny or super fat or black, white, yellow, Latina, whatever you are. There is a niche of porn that guys get off on. I was asked last Sunday, I think it was. Yeah, it was last show, like what I thought about like foot fetishes. And that is something that I do not understand about guys. But if that's a guy's thing and you have nice feet, there you are. You can compete. Guess what? Yeah, there's midget porn right now, right? You have purple hair or blue hair or whatever. That's a niche. And so to say that it's only one thing is ridiculous. And now I can prove that. Now I have the numbers to prove that. Another great book, before I move on here to the article, another great book is called, was it A Billion Wicked Thoughts? And this came out, I think in 2005 or 2006. I think it's been updated by now, but it was actually the first kind of book of its kind that was aggregating this data for that time. And remember, they only had maybe, I don't know, 1998, 1999 to go on from that up to where they were. It's a really good book. I think like the data collection aspect of it is still pretty relevant today, but the conclusions, and I was Ogvis and Ogvi. I can't remember the name of the authors, but they, the conclusions that they came to, a lot of people were very, very resistant to. Now people take what they were resistant to for granted because we see it so often. So you want to know why, like, we have black pill and red pill and blue pill and, you know, MGTOW and MRAs and whatever branches, like all of that stuff that we take for granted now is part of like, well, this is what we're really about, man. It's the black pill. Finally, you're taking it. No, you have to understand the process of getting there. Because a lot of the stuff that you take for granted right now is like, oh, this affirms my beliefs. Well, it started back in 2002, right? 2001. And a lot of the guys, like when I was back there, people were very, very resistant to it. And that, you want to know why I chose Rollo Tomassi as my sort of pseudonym, or why I was anonymous for a very long time. I wouldn't show my face until 2017. It was because of that, because there was so much resistance to it that people would try to fight you and they would try to erase you, dox you, and cancel you. Now we call it cancel culture. It's been around for a long time. I think cancel culture is not a new invention. They've been doing it for a while. It's just been a little bit, less obvious, I think. But now people are just totally comfortable with doing it. So, but that's why, because the stuff that like I'm going to read to you here, the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule was very controversial. I'm going to show you real quick this. I'm sure you guys have seen this because I might have shown this. Where'd it go? I might have shown this picture. There we go. This is if you go and you look up hypergamy on Google, you'll probably see this. Do any of you know where this came from? This is 2011. I know exactly where this came from. This came from a site called Hooking Up Smart. And I remember and this is like one of the number one ways that people explain hypergamy to other people. And I remember when it came out because I used to lock horns with the lady who was let's just say proprietor. Her name was Susan Walsh. I used to call her Aunt Giggles because she was really kind of Pollyanna in her understanding of things. And she was really trying to push sort of a feminine narrative, I think, on the red pill at that time. But this is something that she came up with. And I thought was funny is, she's trying to be sort of clever and cute with this whole thing. And when you look at the guys who are sort of on the, what is it, 7 or below, or actually 8 or below, then you can see what we're talking about here. Now, the only thing I would adjust about this is I would put every single one of the pink ladies on the left-hand side pointing towards the top, like 8s, 9s, and 10s. Because that's sort of where honestly, I think that's where we were in the beginning. But remember, certainly prior to the sexual revolution, but like immediately after the sexual revolution, and immediately like right up to maybe the mid 90s, women, well, I won't even go that far. Let's just say like the late 80s, women had to be in some way dependent or looking for a guy who had some sort of provisioning potential. And this is, like I said, this is the most sort of bonehead illustration of hypergamy. I'm going to close this out real quick and bring this up. I got another one to show you real quick before I move on to the article here. Where did it go? It's the application. There we are. So that was the first one. That was kind of the cutesy version of people trying to explain hypergamy. This one I don't necessarily think is fantastic, but this is also from a 2012 essay that I wrote on the Pareto principle. So if you look at the sexual freedom side of things, case one, without socially enforced long-term monogamous bonds between men and women, this is where you get the CAD society, right? So you've got women who are at let's just say 3 and above, getting with guys 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, I think that's a little bit optimistic. I think things have changed a little bit since then. Now, here's the part I disagree about. Regulated sexuality. And I know that Peterson has talked about this as well. And this is what's called the sort of mating theory. A sort of mating theory goes something like this, right? Case 2, regulated sexuality. Strict enforcement of lifelong monogamous bonds between men and women, the perfect dad society. And this comes back to what I was saying before when Royce had written about CADs versus dads. And one of the things that, maybe I'll just take this out. Let's pull that. There we go. One of the things that Royce used to talk about is when one of the criticisms, and this is the early criticisms, like back in 2009, 2000 to maybe 2012, 2013, particularly amongst like moralists, and we used to call them moralists. Now we call them tradcons, whatever you want to call them. One of their main critiques was, well, beta males are getting laid. Beta males are still having sex and they're still reproducing. They're still they're actually, from a Darwinistic perspective, beta males are out breeding alphas, right? The CADs. And Royce came up with this, a very interesting sort of like, I won't call it paradox, but it's certainly a rebuttal to that, is that it might be true that he used to call them herbs, right? Herbivores, men. Like, it might be true that herbs are reproducing or still having babies, like assuming they don't marry single mothers. So this led me to the idea of the epiphany phase, right? Where women sort of, when they get to be 29 to 31 years old, that's when they start looking for the guy who's the beta in waiting, the guy who's still ignorant of the sexual marketplace and ignorant of his value towards that woman. And then wants to settle down and says, you better do your duty. I'm not easy. I changed my ways. I'm getting right with God, blah, blah, blah. I've talked about the epiphany phase before, but where does that come from was the real question. And the thing is that Royce used to say this, or he would get the criticism from what we would call tradcons now. And he would say this, it was like, well, those guys are still winning the Darwinian evolutionary, jackpot, or the game, right? Because if the game is to successfully reproduce, well, it looks like the dads are doing pretty good, right? I mean, because we still see, women are doing that. Maybe things have changed since like 2009, 2010. And yeah, I would agree with that. But if you're thinking about breeding versus banging is the difference there. And that's a point that Royce made, was that the CADs are out banging, like banging more than dads are. So the CAD is the guy, like, you want to know where I got the stereotypical guy in the hot co-ed guy in the foam cannon party in Cancun. That's really where that originated from, was the kind of guy that women want to have sex with and the kind of guy that women want to marry and settle down with. And that's something that has been around forever. And that's why I disagree with the idea of a regulated sexuality. Like I was just showing you that graph a minute ago, is because hypergamy has been a thing since we've been tribal, critters on the sub-Saharan African savanna. Hypergamy has been a thing. It's part of women's innate, evolved mating strategy. It is always on. Now, before you guys lose your minds, before you guys say, well, shouldn't it be different for men? Well, okay, hear me out. Get this through your thick heads, because I always get some comment about this. Okay? Hypergamy is always on. How it is expressed is according to context. It's according to the society. It's according to the ethnicity. It is according to the culture. It is according to whatever environmental or sociological buffers that either limit it or emphasize it. And that's where we're at right now, is emphasizing hypergamy, because all bets are off, and they have been off since the sexual revolution. So I don't know how many different ways I can explain this. Prior to the sexual revolution, we had things like church. We had social stigmas for women being single mothers. We had social stigmas for women being, sleep around girls. Right? We had social stigmas against that. And matter of fact, as I said before, when women in occupied France or occupied Holland were getting it with Nazi officers or whatever, Nazi soldiers, that was open to them during that time. And when the Nazis were defeated, then suddenly the social situation changed. Had the Nazis won, those women would have been in a good spot, but they bet wrong, because the social situation was not what they believed that it was, or what it was. They made a bad bet, and they paid the price for it. So that's a good illustration of that. But the thing is that depending on what the society is, and usually up until recent times, up until really the last 50, maybe 60 years, it's been a patriarchal man's world, right? It's been at least ostensibly, it has been. Now, there's been ways that women have pushed back against that, and sort of what I keep saying is the gynocentric social order, or the feminine imperative, has ways to sort of get underneath that, but they don't need all bets are off. They don't need that anymore. So when we look at hypergamy, when we look at, like, when I say it's always on, it's just how it manifests is different depending on whatever society or whatever the times sort of dictate towards women, or the men dictate for women. And now that's why I do not agree with the idea of a regulated sexuality. Now, monogamy is something that was a buffer. That buffer is gone, or it has been. It is going away. Let's say it's not entirely gone yet, but it has been something that has been sort of like socially enforced monogamy has been something that has been a part of like human culture, and not just Christianity. And I'm gonna play a video here for you by Nick Krauser that he did with London Real back in 2012, where he kind of explains this a little bit. And I think I would do it myself, but I think he probably explains it a little bit better than I can. And he talks about how like monogamy was sort of a Christian invention. And I don't agree with that, because I think monogamy has been something that has been sort of multicultural. It's been across the world. Although when we think about monogamy, we think about one man, one woman, we think of it in terms of sort of a Judeo-Christian context. But what is the latent purpose? What is the latent function of monogamy? It is to regulate solving that reproductive problem. So when you have women who are obeying the 80-20 rule, and now they have no other reason not to, why wouldn't they? We're looking at a society that's sort of leaning back towards our kind of primal feral beginnings, where women would only go for those because they didn't at a point now. I think we see, like, in our evolutionary past, men had to be there to protect women, had to provide for women. They had to be at least in some way, there had to be sort of a compromise. Like I said before, there's the cardinal rule of relationships, which is for one mating strategy to succeed, the other one has to either compromise or be abandoned entirely. Prior to the sexual revolution, there was a compromise, mostly for men and women. So women might be pushed into, say, an arranged marriage, or they might have to, it was like a marriage of convenience is something we'll talk about, or the romantic ideal, which is something I get into in book 4, was kind of a regulation, or it's kind of like a balance or buffer against the idea of, say, like prearranged marriages, or women should have the right to choose who it is that they want to breed with. And then guys go, yes, that would be the noble thing to do. And so we kind of fell into that. But we used to, innately, human beings are more promiscuous, are more polygamous, or polyamorous, let's just say. Polygamous, I think, is a really better word for it. Than we are monogamists. But socially enforced monogamy ensures, and this is the latent purpose of social enforced monogamy, the latent purpose is making sure that the most amount of men breed with the most amount of women. So you get things like one-itis. You get things like the soulmate myth. You get things like there's someone out there for you. You just got to find her. I found the one. Why do we think that way? Why is that even today in the 20, and it's the first thing I put in book 1 to sort of dispel the myth. Why is it that we cling to the idea that there's got to be our soulmate out there somewhere? We just got to go find her. She's out there somewhere. Why? Why would that even like enter our brain? Why would that be part of popular culture? Why would that be something like Disney to this day still, foments in society? Because that was a social convention that we had to teach human beings, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-societal, whatever, because now we're sort of leaning towards a global society. But like back then we had to sort of spread it out. Why is monogamy something that seems like it seemed like a good idea? Well, because it ensured that even the 80%er guys in the Pareto principle still reproduced. They still had, a chance, right? They still could get with that girl. And that's why I think the regulated sexuality side of that thing, where it's like 10s get with 10s, 9 gets with 9s, 8s get with 8s, 7s get with 7s. And this is what's called the assortative mating theory, I guess. And that might have been the case for a while, because women, when they needed men to be providers, when they needed them to be the protectors, when they weren't empowered by the internet, when they weren't empowered by Title IX and abortion on demand and all the things that came in the wake of the sexual revolution, when they didn't have that, they still had to make compromises according to the cardinal rule of sexual strategies. So while they would all like to get with the top 20% of guys, they couldn't always do that. And that's I want to stress this point, because that is one of the things that I think guys sort of lose their minds about now. Is that, well, if I'm not one of those 20%er guys, I'll never get laid, or I'll never have anything. And I think a lot of guys have decided that that's their fate and that's what they're going to do. And I have brought up the general survey study, I think it was 2019, was that 18 to 24-year-old men are having like less or no sex at all, and have either no interest in it. At the same time, like stats since like 2015, 2014 are showing that men are more and more unemployed and more, sort of economically unattractive, right? Remember that episode? And so why is that? Well, if you ask the statisticians and you ask the sociologists and the psychologists and everyone else, they will say, well, it's because of video games and pornography. Well, as I've said before, it'll be something else. If it wasn't that, it would be something else. It'd be soccer, it'd be fishing, it'd be whatever. Because the one thing that they don't want to look at, let me put this back up again. There you go. This is the regulated sexuality versus, and so like the regulated sexuality that might have, and I don't think it's quite like parallel as this, but that might have been something was relevant prior to the sexual revolution. Now with sexual freedom, as you see, we go and we prioritize hypergamy. So in a regulated sexual society, which one of these ones looks like it would be controlled by betas, and which one looks like it would be controlled by women's? Which one of these, if we look at sexual freedom versus regulated sexuality, which one of these looks like a female mating strategy, and which one of these looks like a mating strategy created by men to distribute reproductive access to the most, to benefit the most men? Now, there's reasons for doing that, and I think I've talked about those before. I'm going to pull that out. But anyways, so when we talk about 80-20, 80-20 is something that is, I think, unique. I don't want to say unique, but it is a characteristic of women's mating strategy. 100% of women want to get with the top 20% of guys. Can all of those women, whether from ones to tens, can they all get with those guys? No, they can't. That's why I keep telling you guys, and all you guys are going to lose your minds about this. Hypergamy is not a straitjacket. Did you hear that? I should put it in big bold print here. Hypergamy is not a straitjacket. So when a woman is 22, 23 years old and she's at the peak of her sexual market value and the world is her friggin' oyster, yeah, okay, she seems pretty powerful. And that's when women go and they start OnlyFans, and that's when they become porn stars, and that's when they make the most money doing whatever it is, selling their ass on whatever social media that you want to see. What I don't know that this is like, we don't have the stats for this yet because it hasn't gone on long enough, but I will guarantee you that given enough time, you will find that the most amount of pictures that women upload to Instagram or social media will most likely be around the ages, between the ages of say like 14 and 24, 25, and maybe more later. But I think that the most that they will do will be right around there. And that'll be an interesting statistic to look forward to in the future when women get to be like 60, like the women who are 14 now, or the girls who are 14 now become 60-year-olds like in the future. Maybe look at those stats. I will guarantee you that will be a correlation of some sorts. But left to women's own device, left saying, well, you don't need to worry about provisioning. You don't need to worry about beta bucks. You don't need to worry about protection. You don't need to, and I've talked about protection before. You don't need to worry about any of that stuff. What's left? Alpha seed. And that's where we should be looking right now instead of trying to make up excuses. And when I read this Quillette article to you, you will understand, because it is written from an old order perspective, an old order ideology, an old order with priorities on old order psychologies. So when we look at this, the presumption is that women are only looking for the beta buck side of hypergamy. So it's, well, the guys who have the most money are the guys who are going to be the best, are going to be the ones that, like, if Jeff Bezos walks into the room, then, you know, all the girls want to get with him. Yeah, Lauren Sanchez does because she's a predatory woman. But the fact is that there's only one of those guys, and that's not the only criteria women have, certainly not for arousal, right? If they want to get laid, and most of them do, money is, I'm going to say it's not important, it is, but it's kind of low on the list next to what women in a global sexual marketplace believe they deserve, believe that they are entitled to. They're entitled to Brad Pitt. They're entitled to Chris Evans. They're entitled to Chris Hemsworth, right? They're entitled to the hottest guy that they can get attention from. And how do I know that? Well, it's all in the stats that they seem to think we don't even need to worry about. We're just going to talk about what are their financial prospects and what are their life prospects, because old order thinking is still stuck in the age where provisioning and beta bucks was the priority. It is no longer the priority. I'm not saying it's not I'm not saying that it's not important. It is, but it is less important from 2010 to 2020 than at any other time in human history. So to say, well, they're like, and I said this before, this is the mistake that I think a lot of very intelligent men make. Okay, like Jordan Peterson, Steven Pinker, Warren Farrell for sure. I mentioned this in the interview that I did for the Dutch television, the VidPro. Was it VidPro? No, it was what's it called? VPro was the Dutch public television interview that I did back in October of last year. And I'm glad they did this. That was a real, if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it, or I'll tweet it out so you guys can see it once again. I'm glad that they did this one part because it's very relevant to what I'm talking about right now, which is when you look at old order thinkers, like, unfortunately, Dr. Warren Farrell, who was in that piece with me. It's in that documentary with me. When you look at Hannah Rosen, right? She wrote The End of Men back in 2010. And some things she got right and some things she got wrong because she also has old order thinking, which is that, well, only women are just looking for the guy who's going to be the good dad. It's cads versus dads. Cads are outbanging dads. Dads might still reproduce. Dads still might be on the hook for parental investment and for resources and everything else. But dads don't bang as much as cads. So in a world where we have birth control, where we have, like we said, what is this, unrestricted sexuality, who does better? Is it the guy? Well, the dads are still breeding. They're still having babies. Yes, they are. But the guys who are getting the sex that women want to have are the cads. And they're still getting that today. And that's why, like, you get the black pill and you get MGTOWs and everything. You're like, oh, I can't believe they want that hot guy. But I need to do jazzercise. That guy has turned into sort of this caricature. He's turned into a cartoon. In fact, we see cartoon memes of Chad Thundercock, right? Chad with the big chin and the hair. It looks like, what is it? Tony Bravo? Tony Bravo? Is that what it is? Johnny Bravo. It's Johnny Bravo. When you look at like Elliot Rodger, yes, that's his real name. And crying and just agonizing over Chad's and Stacy's. That's where we become. That's where we got that. Where we got, how we got to this point. That's why the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. And if you're on the out, there's a lot of ways that you can end up in the 80 percentile, I guess, the 80th percentile. And it's not just looks so much, but it's also social skills and also social intelligence. Sorry, guy, looks maxers. It's not just about looks. That's important, very important, but it's not just about that. So when I'm going to do, I think it's probably better to just go and read this to you. So I am going to pick this up, and this is in a Chrome tab. So let's put this over. Actually, before I'm going to read this first. Let's read this. I'm trying to decide how I want to go about doing this. There, can you guys see that? I guess you can. Oh, good. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to read a little bit of this. I'm just going to go through it. I'm just going to whip through it as quick as I can. Okay. Attraction, inequality, and the dating economy. This came out. Oh gosh, this came out in March 12th, 2019. I think another guy was sending this my way. So this is actually about a year old. So let's see. Jesus said blah blah blah. Okay. Let's see. However, the relentless focus on inequality among politicians is usually quite narrow. They tend to term, that's not it. Okay, this is it right here. There are so many other types of inequality that get airtime less often and or not at all. Inequality of talent, inequality of height, number of friends, longevity, inner peace, health, charm, gumption, intelligence, and fortitude. And finally, there is a type of inequality and that everyone thinks about occasionally and that young single people obsess over almost constantly. Inequality of sexual attractiveness. Sound like black pill? Yeah. The economist Robin Hanson has written some fascinating articles that use the cold inhuman logic economists are famous for to compare inequality of income to inequality of access to sex. Okay, so now remember, I don't know if this, I guess this came before the GSS study, which was showing that the demographic of 18 to 24-year-old guys were not having sex, but women still were, and we'll see why. If we follow then a few steps of his reasoning, we can imagine the world of dating as something like an economy in which people possess different amounts of attractiveness. Sound like the sexual marketplace or sexual market value that Red Pill has been talking about, I don't know, since 2002? And those with more attractiveness can access more and better romantic experiences. Remember, experiences. Not just, you're going to get married, right? The dating economy's version of consumer goods. So dating, sexual market value is a commodity. If we think of dating in this way, we can use the analytical tools of economics to reason about romance in the same way we use reason about economies. Okay, I agree with that to a point, but we also have to understand, you have to take into effect the X factor of women's sexual strategy, as well as women's prioritizing emotionality above reason. So I'm gonna tread into a little bit of dangerous water here, because I'm the first one who will tell you that you can't reason a woman into bed. Okay, but you can analyze what's going on here, and this is where this is useful. It says one of the useful tools that economists use to study inequality is the Gini, Gini coefficient. I want to say it's Gini, maybe it's Gini. This is simply a number between 0 and 1, and that is meant to represent the degree of income inequality in any given nation or group. Okay, an egalitarian group, which is completely like equal, right? Which each individual has the same income, would have a Gini coefficient of 0, while an unequal group would have with one individual having all the wealth or all the income would have a Gini coefficient of 1. Okay, so when Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett walk into a room, the Gini coefficient of that room shoots up. So 0 is complete equality between men and women, and a 1 would mean that women completely control the sexual marketplace, or a 1 would mean that men would completely control that. Okay, so some enterprising data nerds have taken on the challenge of estimating the Gini coefficients for the dating economy. Now I'll go. If you really want to pick this up, I put the description in, or the link is in the description there. But I'm just going to just sort of fast forward a little bit here. It says a data scientist representing a popular dating app, Hinge, reported that the Gini coefficients he had found in his company, abundant data, treating likes as the equivalent of income. He reported that heterosexual females face a Gini coefficient of 0.324, while a heterosexual male faced a much higher Gini coefficient of 0.542. So this is sort of like the nerdy kind of mathematician way of saying that women have a far greater control when it comes, at least, to online dating. And when it comes to, say, like meeting someone online on Match.com, this is Hinge, of course. That later on they talk about Facebook and Tinder, of course, is involved in all of this good stuff too. Okay, so a little bit later on, I don't know who this person is. I think she's a statistician or she's an economist. Is Tinder's Gini coefficient is 0.58, meaning it has a higher inequality than 95% of the world's national economies. And this is the one I wanted to get to. As an example, consider how this increased competition plays out in online dating platforms. On Tinder, the top 20% of men are competing for the top 78% of women. So what that means is that 80% are going for the smaller. It's the opposite here. So why is that? It's a matter of breadth of selection. Offline, due to the constraints of the physical space and time, any given woman would have a finite set of potential partners to choose from. Online, the selection is much more vast, and most women only like the most attractive men. The Gini coefficient for the Tinder economy is 0.58, which means that it has a higher inequality than 95% of the world's national economies. In other words, it's pretty grim if you're a man in the bottom 80%. And this is where everyone wants to beat themselves up, right? I'm never going to get it. I'm never going to be whatever. And so what happens is they give up. And maybe they do so rightfully, and maybe they don't. But this is the kind of data set that guys will simply just give up on. So I'll go on a little bit more here. Let's see there. Okay, so social commentators today are very interested in gender gaps, right? Okay, especially the alleged difference in pay between men and women who do the same work. Of course, we know that the gender gap is nonsense, right? Another statistic that we have access to that we can prove, but nobody wants to believe because they're emotionally invested in the idea that women don't make as much as men. There are other notable gaps, including the libido gap that is well known or well documented in scientific literature, with men desiring sex much more frequently and intensely than women, and also the age gap, in which younger adults are described as more attractive on average. with an especially large age disadvantage for older women. Haha, here we go. The Gini coefficient gap indicated in these studies is something like a sexual inequality gap or attractiveness distribution gap. Less obvious, but potentially even more socially significant than some of the better known gender gaps. Yes, and why is that? Because it disadvantages men. That's why. That's why nobody wants to talk about this. That's why everybody thinks, just me saying this right now makes it sound like I'm playing the victim. Poor men, those poor 80%ers. Shouldn't women be able to choose? Shouldn't they be able to get romantically involved with who they want to? Well, that's because we have prioritized, in a gynocentric social order, we have prioritized women's sexual strategies, women's mating strategies as the predominant social strategy in this new order, in this new social, in this globalizing social market, or sexual market, a globalized sexual marketplace, but certainly our social marketplace too. We don't want to hear about men complaining that they can't get laid. We don't want to hear about those 80%ers. We don't want to hear about a gender gap, right? A sexual inequality gap, because God forbid, because what are you suggesting? Rape? Because that's where we'll go with this. That's where women will go with this. Because all you have to do is say, well, there's a sexual inequality gap. Well, men aren't owed sex. Are you saying we should sleep with men we don't want to have sex with? That's rape, right? Isn't it? And so, end of discussion. There's no solution to this. Well, there is a solution, but I'll tell you what that is here in a minute. Okay, so he continues. There are no villains in this story. Nobody can or should be blamed for his or her honest preference. And if women collectively believe that most men are unattractive, what grounds does anyone, male or female, have to argue with them? Right? That was the same thing that I read about when Dataclysm came out. Because in Dataclysm, and I'm going to insert this as sort of a little aside here, but Dataclysm came up with some really interesting stats. One of those stats was that women tend to be, well, first of all, it was the first time that I saw in black and white in numbers that women rated 80 to 85, maybe it's 83% of guys as unattractive, not average, unattractive, guys they would not get with. And usually it was based on two criteria: looks and whatever the profile was, or whatever their introduction was, or, hey, I like you, let's get together and have coffee sometime, like that, whatever that approach was online. And we're finally in a globalized sexual marketplace where women can just simply sit back and take offers, right? It's a buyer's market, right? For women for a time. So when women are in a prime selective age, let's say, in their peak sexual market value, then their sexual selectivity, their commodity as someone that guys want to get with, is way higher than it will be later on. But we'll get to that. We're going to talk about the wall today as well. So let me continue here. So we may pity the large majority, we don't pity, but we may pity the large majority of men who are regarded as unattractive and who have few or no romantic experiences, while a small percentage of attractive men have many. Remember that. Actually, let me just throw this one out there. Do you guys remember me talking about men's mating strategies? And I don't mean just like unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. All guys would like that. It's like similar to like hypergamy. All women are hypergamous. It's always on. It's how it's manifested. For men, unlimited access to unlimited sexuality is always on. It's something that guys are always interested in. Again, pornography. But not all guys, as we clearly see here in the numbers, can do that. They can't, they don't have access. So what do they do? How do they modify their sexual strategy? How do they modify how do they solve their reproductive problem? Monogamy, social conventions, stigmas, the things that used to be in place that are no longer in place. That's one way to do it. The other way is what I've said in the past, which is strategic pluralism theory. And strategic pluralism theory, just to refresh your brain here, is that men low SMV, sexual market value, low SMV men have to adjust their strategy. They have to do something different. They have to find some way to overcome the deficit that their competitors, that the 20% guys, don't have to deal with. So what do they do? Well, like, I got to be good a provider. I got to do this. I have to have value added. And this is the logic. Got to have value added for this person, for this woman, for the woman that I am focusing on. Remember when I've talked about how guys develop a sniper strategy? Like, they focus on that one girl and they try to prove their quality to her, and they try to, they want to become the perfect boyfriend. I think I talked about this in Perfect is Boring, where they try to do everything. We call them the emotional tampons. We call them the guys who are the phone friends, the guys who are like really reliable, the dutiful guys, the guys who women want to get with when they're in their epiphany phase. They want to get with those guys because they're a better bet at that point. And women have to kind of like have this internal conflict about, well, I really want to lock down the alpha, but this guy's more reliable and I'm not getting any younger. So there's that compromise. And I think that that's still in place right now, but it's getting pushed back further and further in sort of the age range for women right now. So when we get to that point, when you got that guy, what's that guy's strategy? His strategy is put all of his effort and all of his energy and all of his resources into one woman, into a monogamous relationship. I will never cheat on you. I will never do this. I will always have a job. I love my mother. I like puppy dogs. I'm a funny guy. I've got all of these great sort of intrinsic qualities, but I'm not as hot as the guy in the foam cannon party. So what those guys think, and usually through a sort of a socialization, through a blue pill conditioning, guys believe that if they play their cards right, and if they show that they're loyal and dutiful, and they're not like other guys, because that kind of strategy always relies on trying to make the blue pill beta guy, AFC beta guy, unique, because he's not like other guys. So there's this always going to be this impression that like the other guys are the guys who are the chads, right? They're the guys they're the players. They're the guys who are going to use you. I'm not going to use you. I'm like this. I love my mom. I go to church. I have dogs. That kind of stuff, where there's this constant one focus on one woman. Does that sound to you like one-itis? Does that sound to you like the soulmate myth? Because that's why those social conventions, that psychology, in some cases, those religious beliefs are in place to help aid in socially enforced monogamy. So when we focus on, when we're a sniper mentality rather than sort of an abundance mentality, when we're in a scarcity mentality, that's where that comes from. It comes from strategic pluralism theory. Put all your eggs in one basket. Put all your efforts into one woman, because you're the kind of guy, you're the 80% guy who doesn't get that many opportunities. In fact, when you do get those opportunities, it's luck, it's God, it's fate. The clouds opened up and the angels sang, you found the right woman. And that's, you want to know why guys get they think that self-deprecation is sort of game? It's because of that. It feeds right into strategic pluralism theory. Focus on her, make her the more than you. She must become more so, and you must become less. She is, what is it? Women are light years ahead of men when it comes to being connected to God, right? That's a quote from my book, and I'll be happy to tell you where I got that from. But that's the kind of belief. That's like, we're going to put all of our eggs in this one basket. We're all going to, this is how we work it. And you know what? Because there's more of those beta guys, because there's more of those guys who subscribe still to that old order thinking when it comes to the soulmate myth, when it comes to socially enforced monogamy, they are happy to pass that around. In fact, they're happy to not only pass that around and reinforce that belief in every guy, including the 20% guys. They'll police them. They'll shame other men. They'll attack those other men because those guys have the sexual access, and they're the 20%ers that women want to get with. So they will say, well, I know you're lucky with the ladies. I know you're a good looking guy. I know you're an athlete. I know all this stuff about you, blah, blah, blah. But because you're like Leonardo DiCaprio is a good one. Like, because people keep sending me don't send me this graph anymore. Okay. I got it. Okay. I know Leonardo DiCaprio has a preference for women who are under 25 years old. I saw that graph where he was like, His first girlfriend was 18, and then she got to be about 23 or 24, dumped her, got with another girl who was like 21, 22. She got to 25, dumped her, and right now I think he's got to be in his 40s, maybe he's in his 50s, and he's still with a chick who's like 25 or under right now. And people think that that's some like fiendish thing that he figured out on his own. Like, that's the only thing I'm going to do is date women who are 25. Well, he's Leo DiCaprio. He can do what the hell he wants to. But it's not that it's like some fiendish plot. He's just following his natural, innate mating strategy. And nobody, most guys, I don't say nobody, but the 80% guys, like we said, Pareto principle, don't have access to the kind of women that he has access to. Young, hot, fertile women under the age of 25, between the ages of at least 20 to 25 years old. That's his natural demographic for women. And so what do guys do? They see that graph and they go, oh, I can't believe that. He's such a player. And women will go, oh, he's terrible. I hate him. But they're the first ones that would jump on his lap if they had a chance to do so. So you can take that and you can compare that to a guy like Keanu Reeves, who's with a woman who is in her 40s and he's in his 50s. She's in her 40s and she looks like she's in her 60s. So what happens then, right? What happens when we compare Leonardo DiCaprio and his mating strategy, innate mating strategy, to the strategy of Keanu Reeves? Well, Keanu Reeves is a good-looking dude, still even in 50s. I think he's a little older than me. He still can he could easily pull women like half his age if he wanted to. But because he's with a woman who's 46 and looks like she's 66, women praise him. Oh, I love him even more. Because he's dating somebody who's age appropriate. Where do we get the idea of age appropriateness? Well, we get it because men are supposed to stay in their friggin' lane, right? Beta men are supposed to stay in their lane. And even if it's Keanu Reeves, we still have to reinforce the narrative that men, by and large, still should be applying themselves according to strategic pluralism theory, which is stay in your lane, focus on one girl, make sure she's age appropriate. Don't dump a girl just because she's 26. Don't prioritize your innate mating strategy, even though you could do it, Mr. 20%er, even though you are an alpha male, even though you are a movie star. You shouldn't do that. It's wrong. It's immoral. You're not following the way that socially enforced monogamy should be your priority. And the reason they do that is because it helps intra-sexual competition. So it's like there's more 80%, there's more 80%ers than there are 20%ers, right? So if all the 80%ers can encourage or at least influence maybe half of the 20%ers, that's 10% more that they got, that we all play by the same rules. we're all, monogamy is really a beta male mating strategy in a sense. Because it through social means, through superstition, through whatever, through morality, through whatever, if you want to call it a social convention, let's just say a social convention. Through social conventions, if you can convince the most amount of men to believe that there's one woman for one man, right? Where we all should be monogamous. We're naturally monogamous, right? If you can convince that many, then what that means is that the most amount of men are going to reproduce. The problem now is that we don't do that anymore. Well, I shouldn't say that. We do that for men. We don't do that for women. Women now are happy and comfortable and like I said back in 2014, they have embraced hypergamy. They have embraced open hypergamy. So now that's fine. Socially enforced monogamy is fine for you chumps, but I deserve the hot guy in the foam cannon party. I deserve Leonardo DiCaprio, even though he is the way he is, right? I deserve this guy. And you know what? In fact, I deserve it so much that it's right here on my phone. It's right here on Tinder. It's right here on Hinge. It's right here. Look, I'm spoiled for choice. Why would I? Why would I be like, if I was a woman today, I'd get the hell out of here. Even as old as 40, even as old as 50. And that gets us to the wall, which I'll get to here in just a second. I want to finish up here. And then like I was saying before, if you bring this up, if you say anything red pill, if you say anything or write an article like this, just writing an article like this, and this is like very, I think, lopsided towards beta provisioning, but even writing this article, the guy who's writing the article Sounds like he's complaining. Sounds like he's saying men are the victim, and men can never be the victim, because if they're victims, they're incompetent, and women select for competency. That's part of hypergamy, right? It's the dominance hierarchy. It's a dominant hierarchy and a competence hierarchy. You have to be competent at everything. And the moment you complain, the moment you say my back hurts, the moment you show any kind of weakness, that's when you become. That's what triggers that hindbrain, lizard brain part of women's brain stem. It says this guy's a liability. This guy is weak. It's not like, oh, you're weak. It's not that. It's he's not competent. He is now a liability. He might drag me down. I don't want to have to carry his dead weight if we get attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. I'm out. Bye. You can't protect me. You can't provide for me. That's not really what's happening. I understand that's over the top, right? That's binary. That's me being to the extreme. But that's what the hindbrain, that's what the lizard brain thinks. It thinks in extremes. You want to know why people like default to binary extremes right now? It's because of that. It's because of that black or white, on or off. Like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like when it's that instinctual side of things. So anyways, let me keep going here. The Gini coefficient gap indicated in these studies is something like a sexual inequality gap. Okay, I got that. Let's see. Okay, so here's where I was. Just as much, consider that we live in a monogamous culture, and ostensibly. And so the 20% of men who are regarded as attractive can only be in a committed relationship with at most 20% of women. No. That's very, very optimistic, but we'll keep going here. We may just as well pity the rest of the women who are destined to be in committed relationships, if they pursue relationships at all, with someone who they regard as unattractive. The only villain in the story is nature, which has molded our preferences so that this tragic mismatch of attraction and availability occurs. Very important. Keep that one in mind. To those who study nature, the various gender gaps in romantic life will not come as a surprise. Evolutionary biologists have seen these types of patterns many times before and can explain each of them. The relative perceived attractiveness of younger women versus older can be explained by higher fertility of younger adults. Again, that's why I have always pegged sexual market value for women. Their peak value is at age 22, 23, somewhere around there. Okay. That's for this era. Okay. We can adjust that for era, but let me continue. So let's see, where did I go with this? Now I lost my space. Okay. So, let's see, the relative perceived attractiveness of younger women versus older women can be explained. Okay. The libido gap can be explained by the different mating strategies instinctively pursued by the distinct sexes. Okay. I want to keep going here. This is pretty good. He goes into a little bit about like how human beings are naturally polygamous. He also talks about how human beings are naturally promiscuous as well. That's straight out of Promiscuity by Tim Burkhead. I want to keep going here because there's a really good. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this was a really good one, and I'll end with this, or I'll end this part with this one right here. So he talks about like I was saying, the regulated sexuality. This is the redistributive type. Okay. So this is not to say that we haven't tried. The institution of monogamy is itself a redistributive type of policy. Okay. This is what I mean by assortative mating. It's different from hypergamy. Hypergamy is, all women going for the top 20%. Redistributive, or assortative mating is sort of like this idealized form of monogamy. If we could have an ideal monogamy, it would look something like assortative mating. Okay, so itself is redistributive. Okay, like capping, it's like capping the income of billionaires. It caps the total allowed romantic partners of the most attractive, so that unattractive people have a much better chance to find a partner. As I was saying before, that's why you get beta men and you get beta society. I want to say beta, but let's say you get guys who are locked in to socially enforced monogamy because of their state, because they are the 80%ers. And they write songs, they write stories, they make movies, they come up with social, and I'm not just, and women do this too, but like they come up with social conventions in order to say, look, this is the society we should have. This is the sexual marketplace that we should have, which is redistributive. It's a sort of mating. This is how we should do it. And there's someone for everyone, you know. There's that that idea of the soulmate that is part of, whether it's religion or it's their personal belief or whatever. The idea that there's one person for another, for one man for one woman, is something that is part of those social conventions. That is a regulation on the guys who would, well, it's a boon for the guys who wouldn't otherwise reproduce versus the guys who get the most action, right? The 20%ers. All of that is thrown out the window in 2020. So it's a redistributive policy. The marriages that we read about in historical accounts that are based on prudence and family arrangements make more sense when we realize that basing marriage on mutual attraction leads so many, both men and women, to be unsatisfied with the outcome. Since most women find most men unattractive, all the world's great religious traditions have extolled chastity as a great virtue and taught that there are higher goals than sexual satisfaction. These teachings add meaning to the otherwise poor lives of the majority of people who are regarded as perpetually unattractive. So if we can convince societies that there's, like, I get this all the time. People throw rocks at me all the time when I say this. It's like, you need sex. That is a biological, like, in this life, you need sex. You need sex for reproduction, whatever it is, right? It's a part of life. People say, well, you don't need sex. You know, you can breathe and drink and you need food and that's all you need. Well, if that's your idea of a life well lived, go right ahead. I am of the opinion that sex is something that is a biological evolutionary need. And if it's not, you have not completed that function. And even tradcons will agree with me on this. Like, they come down on me because I only had one kid, right? Well, if you're not having 8 kids or what is it? If you're having sex and it's not for reproduction, then it's a drug addiction. Well, you need sex for a lot of different reasons, whether it's mental well-being or whatever. But see, the thing is that because of the binary thinking, because of binary extremes, we think that any guy who's having more sex than us is automatically, having sex. It's almost like, it's like money and sex. There's always somebody who's having more of it than you are. And why do guys get upset with that? Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, but I would say primarily it's because of competency and because of dominance. And it's not like so much like a pissing contest as it is a sort of subconscious understanding that somebody is having more access reproductively than you are. So when you got guys who are less successful in the sexual marketplace and you've got guys who are more successful, what's the first thing that the less successful guys say? Well, they try to tear that guy down. He's not having the right kind of sex. He's not having meaningful sex. And that's where we go with this, because if you're acting according to the moral dictates or whatever it is, the social dictates, it doesn't have to be moral. It could be social stigma, religious stigma, whatever stigma, it could be ethnic too. It could be a national thing. If you're not following the way we do things right here, and the way we do things is, if you have more sex than I do, then there's something wrong with you. Then we can talk about porn addiction and all this other stuff, but the fact of the matter is that a guy who's having more sex than another guy is always going to get bad looks. He's always going to look poorly by the guys who aren't getting it. And so what those guys do is they have to find ways to sort of justify for themselves and legitimize their own sexlessness. And that guy is not having sex the way that he should. So therefore you get guys who will say, well, he's had 40 women in his life. So I would hate to be him because he's had meaningless sex his entire life. Well, that whole thing, qualifying whatever, first of all, you don't know. Like, I've had guys tell me this before. Is like, I remember when I was asked what my notch count was, and I think it might have been Pat Campbell asked me one time, and it wasn't on my show. It was like on another show, and it's public knowledge. I'll tell you, it's like 41, 42, something like that. And people lost their minds. Like, oh my God, are you married, dude? I can't believe it. Like that's like that was a high number. And I'm like, I know guys who are like well into the triple digits. But yet, like, I'm a man whore for having 40. And then these guys are like in 300 range or something like that. And women today are happy to tell you that they're in their 20s, 40s, 60s, 100s, whatever. But when a guy hears that another guy's had that much sex, that's when it becomes an issue of qualifying. What kind of sex are you having? Yeah, you've had meaningless sex. You didn't have it with love and family and all of this, all these qualifiers that go along with it. And so therefore, to them, your sexual experiences are invalidated. Again, that's sort of like intrasexual competition amongst men. It's part of that. Women do it too, right? That's why women will say, well, a woman is a slut, or she's a sleep around girl, or whatever. She's not worthy of your investment. Same thing for guys. So because as this is, or certainly Western cultures, globalizing Western cultures, as men become more feminized, they opt for women's tactics to disqualify other guys intrasexually when they combat with that other guy. So that's how you get that. Well, you're just having sex for validation. No, that's what women do. Men have sex because they want to get off, because men and women are different, right? We have different mating strategies and we want different experiences. We want to, like I was just reading here, guys want more sex and they want more intense sex. A lot. And that's pretty much a given. We figured that one out. But when a guy is actually capable of doing that, when a guy actually has the access, the abundance rather than the scarcity, that's when we have to find some ways to disqualify what that guy has. Well, he drives a Lamborghini. He must be a drug dealer. That guy he has a lot of money. So, oh boy, I would hate to be him because, money doesn't buy happiness, whatever, any sex. Well, he's had 100 women. So I would hate to have that much meaningless sex. No, you wouldn't. You would love it. And you know how I know you'd love it? Because you're the ones jerking off to porn. And you've had that same exact, in fact, I would say you jerking off to porn is more meaningless than the guy who's had 40 women and has enjoyed 40 women. And maybe he's with a wife now or whatever, or maybe he's single, who knows? But when it comes to that qualification, that qualifying, the reason why those guys sort of opt for that, or they opt into that ideology, is because they are trying in some way to keep other men in line. We're all going to play by these rules. How are we going to play by these rules? Well, we don't want to tell everybody that we're playing a game. So let's make it a social, a social dictate. Let's make it a religious dictate. Let's make it an online meme, right? Whatever. Let's try to keep these guys corralled, because that way we'll all do better if we all cooperate. Well, the problem with that is that women don't want to cooperate. Women want the guys who are the 20%ers, and they don't need those guys who are still trying to corral the 80%ers who are trying to corral the 20%ers into doing what they're doing. It's if we all just united and had solidarity amongst men, then women would be forced to do what we want them to. Well, unfortunately, evolution didn't work that way. So let me continue. This is the last one. This is the part that I wanted to get to. It says, even in centuries-old fairy tales, like The Frog Prince and Beauty and the Beast. Okay, this is where I think he's wrong. We see cultures attempt to come to terms with the paradigm of a woman regarded as attractive pairing with a man who she regards as unattractive. Okay, this is where I halfway agree with this, but the other half of me doesn't, because Beauty and the Beast is an archetype. Beauty and the Beast is the same story as Tarzan. Tarzan the Monkey Man, right? He's a guy in the jungle who's raised by gorillas or wolves or whatever, and he's uncivilized. He's a savage. And it takes a woman because she falls in love with the savage. She wants to have sex with the savage. It's a great, I would say, archetypal theme, I guess, for women's sexual strategy. They want the guy who, like, it's Superman versus Clark Kent. They want the guy who is like the guy who's raw alpha sex potential. That's Tarzan, right? What does Jane do? What does Belle do in Beauty and the Beast? She civilizes him. She tames the savage beast. And because she's the only one who can do that, because that's how the story goes, then they fall in love and yada, yada. It's not that she is trying to push past his physical ugliness. It's that she's attracted to that ugliness. She's attracted to that raw, feral alpha male. Belle doesn't fall in love with the prince. She falls in love with the beast. She falls in love with the guy who can growl and has teeth and claws. That's what she falls in love with. We don't hear the rest of the story after Beauty and the Beast, right? We don't hear what happened to Belle after the guy turned into this kind of he's a good looking guy, but he's not nearly as built as the beast was. Same thing. Frog Princess. The Frog Prince might be a little more accurate in this, in that well, she falls in love with the prince because the prince is ugly, and that's how we determine true love. Is if you can push past my ugliness. I'm a frog, but if you kiss me, I'll turn into a prince. And in that case, I kind of understand where he's going with this, but I think he's inaccurate when it comes to the Beauty and the Beast. So, but the moral of the story, let's say, is pushing past that unattractiveness, and that might have been that's why we had those fairy tales, right? That might have been like there's a lot of different stories, a lot of different themes that are built on that, like true love. It shouldn't matter, and women have loved this for a long time because like men should. Remember Shallow Hal? Remember that movie Shallow Hal? Well, the girl's like she's this beast, man. She's just like huge, right? She's morbidly obese. But Shallow Hal, for whatever, magically or by drug, I don't know, I forget how it was, but like he would see her as like this gorgeous, beautiful, sexy swimsuit model. And that was sort of like almost a reverse on that, which I think is funny because that is a modern adaptation of, well, it's what's on the inside that counts and not what's on the outside. That right there is a sort of a modern contrivance, I think. It's a modern way of saying, well, I used to hear this in sitcoms like Friends or something. Well, it's what's on the inside that counts, and we all need a warm cup of coffee. It's the idea that our physical persons are the way we look or the way we act, how our breath smells or whatever, like our physical manifest, like our physical bodies on this planet shouldn't have any bearing on who you want to reproduce with, which is absolutely insanity. It is the most insane idea. Like when you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, is the most insane idea I can think of. But what's the latent function of that belief? Well, it is to have what I said, redistributive sexuality, to maintain that social enforced monogamy. So I thought that was pretty funny. Let's see. There was one last little thing here where he was talking about. Is that it? No, that's not it. Sorry, guys. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. This is a good one. Okay, so I'll finish with this. As Western civilization declines, or at least frays around the edges, remember this was written a year ago, the ways our culture has developed to deal with the gap in the attractiveness distribution are receding and dying. Okay, so this is where he kind of comes to the red pill terms. Young people enter the equality-inducing institution of monogamy later and later, or not at all. Well, the reason for that is because of our technology, because of the internet, because of the new enlightenment. That's why. So young people enter in equality-inducing institutions of monogamy. Okay, spending more time in a chaotically unequal polygamous dating world. That is what I was describing as the global sexual marketplace. Monogamy itself is weaker, as divorces become easier, and even married people often reporting encountering dead bedrooms, people, in which one or both spouses feels no obligation to give the partner who they do not regard as sufficiently attractive access to sexual experiences. Yes, because that is women, that's the hypergamous filter. I don't care if you're married to that woman for 10 years, that filter doesn't stop. It's not about, well, what's on the inside? Oh, I feel good. I really love him. Well, but she doesn't, you can be attracted to someone. You can be in love with, like when women say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. What she's saying is, I'm not aroused by you. You don't arouse me anymore. I'm not into it if she was in the first place. And now she doesn't have to be because things have changed socially and technologically. Religious belief is in constant decline, yes, and with it declines the belief in the dignity of celibacy or the importance of anything other than hedonism, sexual or otherwise. Even fairy tales that for centuries helped us understand how to live charitably with each other are disavowed, and cultural tastemakers like Time Magazine and the BBC denigrate them as sexist. The result of these cultural changes is that I don't want to keep going with that. Let me see. I think that was all I wanted to talk about. Oh, the other part of this that I really thought was kind of interesting. Thank you guys. Don't worry. I will get to super chats here in just a second. I wanted to also point out, and I'll play the Nick Krauser thing here in just a second. It's only maybe a 4-minute clip, but I also wanted to point out that and they've said this in the article. I'm just going to paraphrase it because I don't want to keep reading that thing. What he makes a comparison to is that we still have the same brains. We still have the same sort of like physical mechanics, let's say, of our ancestors on the, sub-Saharan African savannas, right? But we're supposed to, like, from the time we were, sort of living in tribes to the time we were agrarian to industrial age and all this other stuff, we've come up with ways. And the reason I wanted to get into this today is because this is something I get into in my fourth book. We come up with ways according to our times as to how we're going to reproduce, how we're going to have relationships, how we're going to start families and keep those families going. I think in Western society, we have like this ideal of sort of this nuclear family that only existed really between, like, say, post-World War II up until like the sexual revolution, really. I mean, 1967, 66, somewhere around there. So you're only looking at the nuclear family ideal for maybe 15 years. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a very good thing. And I think that it's an ideal for a reason. Let's put it that way. But if you're Jewish and you live on a kibbutz, that might be your ideal, right? Or, if you're Muslim and you have 4 wives, that might be your ideal. It's not that, that's just simply how those cultures deal with that. But I think that really since this is just me spitballing here, but since agrarianism, that's when monogamy became a thing, and that's slipped into popular consciousness. Now it's slipping out, for better or worse. I tend to think that monogamy is a good thing. It's a socially balancing thing. Not so much like guys will say, well, don't you think don't you think human beings are naturally promiscuous? Yes, I do. I think we're monogamous by necessity, but we are promiscuous by biology and how we go about like determining like how we're going to start a family. Like I have a very nuclear family, right? I have one wife, only one wife, and I have one daughter, and I've been married, coming up on 24 years. And for some people, that's like an ideal. And for other people, they go, well, you can't take anything Rollo says seriously because he's married, man. Screw that. He's automatically beta. Well, that's what you think. Fine. I have a wealth of experience and I have a wealth of knowledge to share with you. Let's see. Did I get to everything on my list? I think I did. One last thing I wanted to get to is like, how do you rise out of this? How do you get away from this? And I don't want to just leave you guys saying, well, you're all screwed. Good luck. I'm not going to do that. Okay. You have a choice at this point, and I don't have to read you any statistics. I mean, if you're watching my show, you probably already know this. I don't have to read you any statistics. I don't have to convince you of the rest. Usually I don't have to, hopefully, maybe is this your first time watching? I don't have to convince you of that kind of stuff. But a lot of guys are going to say, and I get this all the time. And I was just discussing this with the guys on Rule Zero. Guys will say, well, Rollo, can you suggest some books so I can learn game? Can you suggest some sort of format, some kind of template, some kind of like, where do I start? How do I get out of this? How do I stop being the 80% guy? And a lot of guys would just say, oh, you're doomed. Forget it. Don't you're MGTOW, or black pill, whatever. Just go your own way and just die in peace alone on some lonely hill somewhere, and have a good life, enjoy the decline. I'm not that guy. And I see what you're saying there, Booty Warriors, as rip incels. Yeah. Well, here's the thing is that incels and like guys who've been sort of the losers in the sexual marketplace have been around forever. We've had beta men and AFCs forever. There's always going to be winners and there's always going to be losers. Sorry, welcome to planet Earth. It's all competition. It's a war. What is it? I forget the Latin. It's the war of all against all. And not everybody is out to get you, no. But everybody is out for themselves. Even if it's just on the hindbrain, right? It's in the brainstem. It's the extreme. It's the lizard brain. So it's not that people can't cooperate or I don't want to give you, any kind of information. I do. So my suggestion is this, is like, how do you lift yourself out of that? My first suggestion, my first advice to you, Mr. Single Guy, is this: and John's gonna John from MLD is gonna like throw rocks at me for this, but don't make online dating your only way of practicing game, your only way of meeting women. I understand that that's the popular way, and the reason it's popular is because it's easy and it's comfortable and it's relatively pain-free. Well, if you get rejected online, it's different than having a woman reject you in real life. And guys will say, well, I don't want to ask a girl out in real life. I'll get called. I'll get a Me Too. I'll get Me Too'd. Well, yeah, but you need to learn to read women, and you need to learn to certainly understand, social cues. A lot of guys, I think the biggest hindrance to most guys today is they haven't had the occasion to develop, like, I don't say social intelligence. I don't want to say you're retarded. I mean, if I say you're retarded, I mean it in the clinical sense. I don't mean it in the, you're retarded. I mean in the clinical sense of that they don't have the occasion to learn actual in-person social skills. And sometimes you get slapped in the face. Sometimes you say, hey, can I buy a drink? Oh, okay, sorry. I'll go walk my dog. To have those experiences develops you into, like, for instance, like in my generation anyways, we had to figure it out on our own. If you were good with women, it was because you were interested in women and you wanted to figure out how to do it and how to have more sex than you were at that time. Well, guess what? You're going to probably have to go back to that at some point. And I think we're getting closer and closer to the point where even online is not going to be a preference for most guys. Like, who are the guys that are online anyways? Who are the guys that are paying money to buy, like, what Belle Delphine's bath water or pee or whatever the hell? Like, who are those guys that are doing that? Those guys are always going to be around. How are you going to be better? How are you going to set yourself apart from those things? Well, you can learn game, yes, and you need to. And you need to get in shape. Yes, you need to be attractive. You need to maximize, you need to play to your strengths. There's a lot of different ways to do that. But you also need to live in the real world. You also need to actually take risks. And you're not going to, not every girl is going to find you attractive, unfortunately. Sorry, that's just the way it is. But some might, right? I think that I want to leave you with this idea as well, is that hypergamy is not a straitjacket. So just because women want the guy who's 20%, who's the 20%er, doesn't mean they're going to get that guy. I get this all the time because, like, I'm guilty of this myself. So I'll admit to this. Is like, a lot of guys will say, well, you just think that all women are alike. Like, all women are general, like there's a balance here, right? Like, guys will say, well, you think it's all evolution, and you think it's all determinism, right? It's all biological determinism, right? You just make sweeping generalizations because you think all women are like that. That's one binary. The other binary is this: we're all different. People are people, right? We're all individuals. We're all special snowflakes. You can't possibly put a label on everybody. Men and women, there are women who are very strong and women who are very weak, and there are women who are this, and there's men who are this, and da-da-da-da. And we're all these special little individual snowflakes. You want to know where snowflake came from? That's where it came from. It's the lie of individuation, and that is the opposite binary of that. So yes, do we have individual personalities that are created? Yeah, nature versus nurture. But what happens is the people who believe that, like, we're all these random forces of chaos and we're all just these individuals who don't, you can't possibly predict what we're going to do. They stick to that binary. And then there's the guys who will stick to the idea that all women are like that. They're all hypergamous. I'm doomed because there's always a better guy than me. Well, guess what? The thing is that when you're with that woman, there's that personality of that woman. And guess what? When you think that it's all about personality, there's also the biological determinism or the biological side of that too. So there are, predictive frameworks, let's say, for, like, biological determinism, and there's predictive frameworks for personality as well. So if you got a woman who you think is well, she's looking for a guy, well, why, if you get that cue, if you get that idea, that suspicion that she wants to get with somebody else, the question you need to be asking yourself is, why am I feeling like I need to mate guard this woman? Why do I think that she's wanting to get, with the 20%ers? Like I had a lot of guys tell me this. Remember when Aquaman came out? Remember when Jason Momoa was in it? And like guys would tell me, my mom wants to go see Aquaman. I don't understand. She's never been into DC Comics. Like, it's Jason Momoa, man. That's why, that's biological determinism. There it is. 50 Shades of Grey. Why is it that they all wanted to get with Shift? Why is that one? Why did that author sell 65 million copies of I don't know. They're all individuals. Why would they all individually want to read 50 Shades of Grey? I have a Christian wife. Why would she want to read something like as trashy as that? Biological determinism. That's why, because there's an underlying predictive framework that says this is what women are into, right? That's part of the whole Pareto principle. That's the 80-20 rule. But if we stick to just that, right? If we just say, well, this is we're doomed, forget it. You are now leaning over towards the binary aspect, the binary extreme, I should say, of biological determinism, evolutionary psychology, whatever. You're leaning towards that. But it's equally as unhealthy to lean towards that as it is to say, well, we're all random snowflakes, special as everyone else. Right? We're all different. We all have different faces and different genes and da-da-da-da-da. And we're still human. We still have things that keep us together. So it's finding that balance. And not thinking you're doomed just because, you're well. And the other thing is like women go through different phases, right? So a woman who is 23 years old might be a little bit more predictable according to biological determinism than the woman who is 33 years old, unmarried, childless, and is looking for a long-term situation. Her priorities have changed in just a matter of 10 years, right? So is she the same as the girl that you want to get with at 23 that she is now that she's 33? Maybe you're 40 something and you're getting with a 33-year-old. I don't know, whatever your situation is. But don't think that it is a straitjacket. I'm not saying that, well, it's okay. You can be ugly and don't worry about it. No, you still have to be your best self, right? You have to be the best version of yourself. But you also have to be educated and you have to understand these things. And most guys don't have the patience for that. That's why they opt out. They think that, well, it's too much work. Fuck it. I'm out. No worries. I'm out. I just don't want to do it. I'm MGTOW, black pill, whatever. I'm just going to go be me and that's it. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to join the ranks of guys who are unemployed and because the reason I'm saying this is because there's like ancillary links to this article here where they're talking about the reason why so many young men are unemployed. And then what do you think they say? The reason why men are uneducated, they're not going to college anymore. They're not employed. We have the lowest employment between that. You want to know why we're in such a dire straits in the world today? It's because, I think anyways, because we have this demographic or this generation of young men, 18 to 28, let's just say that 10-year span, unemployed, certainly unemployed after COVID, and no real plans, no real purpose, nothing else. And of course, what do they say? Oh, it's video games. Porn, it's just easier. Yeah, and they're probably right to a sense, but it's also because we've advanced socially for the last 30, 40 years. We have disadvantaged men and advantaged women in sexual marketplace, in social marketplace, in the workplace, and lots of other. They won't touch that. We'll say it's lazy men, but we won't say it's because we've advantaged women. Anyways, oh man, it's raining right now. I didn't think it would be raining. I think we're having it is. Can you guys hear that? We got afternoon thunderstorms coming in. Anyways, okay, so that's what I wanted to throw one more thing out here, and I thought this was really good. I know we're coming up on the full. Maybe I'll just put this as a link. Anyway, I don't have to put this in here. I was going to play Nick Krauser's interview with London Real, and this was from 2020. Actually, you know what? I will play this. This will only take like 2 or 3 minutes. I'll kill it after 2 or 3 minutes. Let's do this. You guys have to see this. I like this one. This is one of the first things that you remember. This is like 8 years ago, man. This is in 2012. And I got to share audio too. Hang on. There we go. You guys see that? Let me look. Yes, you can. Cool. All right. I'm going to play this, just a little bit of this. So.
Is we live in civilization, and civilization is very, very unnatural. I think it's a good thing, don't get me wrong, but it's not the state of nature. It's a construction, and this construction relies on a lot of artificial supports, and one of those artificial supports is monogamy. Like monogamy, in my mind, really exists because of the influence of the Christian religion, which set out the idea of one man, one woman. And that sets off a whole snowball chain of events, which means suddenly the mass of men are guaranteed a mate for life, whereas in the state of nature that doesn't happen. I think approximately 60% of men in the state of nature never pass on their genetic code. But that leads to the investment of beta males into society.
So Nick, before you continue, a beta male, could you break it down for us?
Okay,
Listeners might not know.
Okay, like, this is a term that comes from biology, and it's not strictly speaking scientific. It's more like a useful way of understanding the world. I'm not saying it's literally true. I'm just saying that if you understand the world this way, you will normally have more predictive power. Is you basically have a male hierarchy, and it's a hierarchy of dominance. So if you think about a pyramid, at the top is the alpha male, who is the...
Now remember, he's saying this, the pyramid of hierarchy or dominance hierarchy. This is long. This is in 2012. This is long before Jordan Peterson mentions the same thing.
Leader. Then you have a vast sea of beta males, which is the mass of the population, the male population. And then you have at the bottom the omega males, who are like the dregs of society. And if you want to get a bit more complex, outside the hierarchy, you have the sigma male. So we can go into these more detail later if you want to. But the alpha male is characterized by social dominance. He's maybe 1% of the male population. And he dominates the entirety of the male venues. And he is literally the king in a kingdom. He's the tribal leader and so on. And women are naturally gravitating towards this man. So in the state of nature, these men have harems, literally harems, like the sultans of Turkey or, say, the Mexican kings before the Spanish got there. And what happened through civilization is, in monogamy, all those beta males, because obviously if one guy has 10 wives, 9 guys have nothing. And that leads to very violent, static societies, because in societies where you still have that state of nature, most of the men have no incentive to invest in society. So you end up with violent, dirty, stagnant shitholes like Somalia. And you can see this on council sink estates as well, where you have this breakdown of civilization and go back into the state of nature. So the beta males are the big losers in the state of nature, and the alpha males are the big winners, and the omegas are just invisible. But what civilization does is it breaks that entire chain of events and starts bringing all the beta males into society, promising them a mate. So suddenly these beta males start producing economic surplus, and then these societies outperform the state of nature societies, because they can have professional armies, they can have professional technicians, they can have engineers and so on.
Basically division of labor.
Yeah, and all of those, what we currently take as very positive signs of society, like the ability to master engineering and build an aqueduct.
Right.
Women don't give a flying fuck about that, right? That does not make a girl's pussy tingle, right? But these are extremely productive things. So we created a civilization based on monogamy, which allowed us to basically rule the world. But that needs all sorts of support or it collapses, and it's now in the process of collapsing again.
All right, that's a part I wanted to show you guys right there. So, and I think that that's pretty pertinent to what we're experiencing now. And this is 8 years ago when and Nick and I have talked about this, like back. Nick's a friend of mine. We talked about this, like, well, actually, I shouldn't say just me and him. This is also like a lot of his crew and a lot of guys that like early. I don't say early. I'm like maybe the later pickup artists at the time. This was something that we were sort of developing back then, and so I wanted to throw that out there because there's a social element to the Pareto principle. Remember what he was saying about like sort of regressing, like de-evolution, I guess, back to a natural state. So now it's, I've talked about this in the video I did about poly, the problem with poly. I've written at least 4 essays about the rise of poly right now, polyamory, polyandry, polygyny, or whatever you want to call it. There's a reason why we're seeing these goofy ass stories of like 4 chumps, kind of orbiting a 4, right? And I'm being generous, like well, I forget you guys probably saw that video a few months back about the 4 guys who are living in the same house with the one woman, or you'll get like, I talked about this already, like the, labor of love, right? Oh, the ultimate prize. One of these guys gets to impregnate this woman. That's popular today because we're going back to that. We're regressing back to that natural state. We're going back to the tribal state because we've given women that opportunity. We've given women don't need the provider. They don't need the beta male. They need the alpha. They need the guy who's going to be the hot, fun guy in the foam cannon party. And he's the 20%er. And that's really the truth when it comes to the Pareto principle. Now, is that turning into 90-10? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. So I'm going to go back and get to your super chats here. All right. I talked to you. Okay, I got Chris. Let's see. Kukanem, blah, blah, was whatever. He says, did you see the interview with Yuri Bezmenov? If so, no. What do you think are the goals of Western intelligence agencies and multinational corporations to continue to support, finance feminism, SJWs, blah, blah, blah? I think that, okay, I did not see that, but I do have an opinion on that. I do think that particularly now, if you look at how quickly most multinational corporations were pivoting to the social unrest and across the world, not just in the United States, like all over the place. If you look at how quickly most brands decided that they wanted to jump on, and I don't mean just Black Lives Matter, they jumped on the social justice bandwagon. Whether that's a black check or that's saying, well, we're interested in this, or they have to put out some sort of public statement on brands you would like, what on earth where did this come from? The reason for that is because what that is that's a sort of a declaration. That's a declaration of allegiance right there. And I think what's happening with respect to, and I'm glad you brought up multinational corporations, because I don't think this is so much a social thing or a national thing. I think this is a corporate thing. I think this is, was it the first estate? I forget what they call it. Anyways, I'm spitballing again. But yeah, I think that like aligning up with especially feminism, and I'm contemplating doing a show on this, is I think that the next social crisis that we get once maybe the riots and maybe the social unrest escalates to some kind of real violence. I've already sort of speculated about that, but I think that the next thing that's coming is what I call the pink out. And people keep asking me that. It's if you look at hashtag pink out or whatever, I probably should have used a different one, but the pink out is going to be this, is I think the next wave of crises will be a really big Me Too case or something like that. That's going to trigger that's going to be, at least sort of ostensibly, it's going to be this trigger event, casus belli, right? The cause for the war. It's going to be something that's going to trigger. All the women are going to, okay, so now it's not BLM, now it's not COVID, now it's going to be feminists. Now it's going to, because there is no way in hell that the Great Women's March that went on in 2017 and all that stuff to protest Trump, there's no way that they are not going to show up in the streets in mass screaming their heads off with pink pussy hats after the election. They're not going to do that. It's going to be before. I don't know when, maybe July, maybe August, but we're already seeing the buildup for it. We're seeing like Ron Jeremy. Ron Jeremy got accused of sexual harassment. A bunch of other guys did too. I keep seeing more and more of them. And I'm looking at cases of like a woman who was gone missing. What was it? The woman in Texas who was, I don't think she was National Guard. I think she was actually Army or something like that. She got missing. She's been missing since April 22nd, like two months. But we don't hear about it on Twitter or the national media until now. And so I think what you're going to see very soon is what I call the pink out. It's going to be, it's not like the blackout anymore. It's the pink out. And we will transition. We'll pivot away from whatever, and maybe it'll continue, or maybe it will morph sort of into the social civil unrest we have right now. But I think that's going to be the next step. It's going to be women's issues. It's going to be, Me Too or sexual harassment, because we cannot possibly, and I don't know how we're going to do this, we cannot possibly let Trump go into the election cycle without everybody in the world being reminded that, he said grab him by the pussy. Guaranteed. And I'm making predictions. I might be wrong. I don't think I am, but I think it's going to happen after Joe Biden, or I shouldn't say Joe Biden, after the DNC decides for Joe Biden who his female running mate is going to be, because they've already declared that it's going to be a female. And that's going to be their selling point. You're not voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden's just a placeholder. It's going to be whoever is on the ticket with him, or maybe they just dump him entirely, because just because he's the front runner doesn't mean the DNC can't just dump him and put somebody else in there, or something happens, right? So there you go. Assange Mohammed, Hassan Haji Mohammed. How can we improve the Chad genetic side? You can go to the gym. You can do everything. Here's how you can improve, Mohammed. First of all, go to the gym, right? And what does it say? 68%? I don't know what the stats are. I think it's probably 68 or 70% of certainly Western culture, and certainly in the United States, 68%, at least 68% of the population is obese, overweight, or morbidly obese. If you can get into a normal weight, you've just set yourself ahead of at least 68%. So there is that. That's where I would start, always with the physical first, because that puts you into a mental state. If you get into the habitual state of taking care of your body, that will put you into a better mental state. And from there, you can learn things better. That's your €2 tip. Tony DeLama says, would you consider that the 80-20 rule is contextual? Yes, to an extent. Depends on what the local, remember, just because women are in the global sexual marketplace does not mean that the local sexual marketplace, where they live, their immediate family, their social circles and everything, that doesn't mean that doesn't have an influence on that woman. So the local sexual marketplace, like where she is and like right there, like the sexual marketplace that's not on her cell phone, that still has an influence. So yes, from the perspective of a local sexual marketplace, absolutely. It can be contextual, just as being alpha it can also be contextual. It's not always, but it can be contextual. So it's like the guy who's the teacher of the class, just because he's in a position of directing people around, therefore he's the one everybody's listening to. He automatically has at least social proof because he's the teacher, he's the master, he knows what he's talking about. Therefore he has some, at least, again, the hindbrain for women says, okay, he's the one who's calling the shots. He must be alpha. Even if he's not, he'd have to do something like really, maybe after a while you kind of go, okay, he's kind of a chump. But the initial impression, the observation anyways, is definitely contextual. Yes. So he says, live in Holland. Notice that most girls choose according to the 80-20 rule, but within their social circle. Yes. 80-20 appears hence much more relative than absolute. I would say that it is more absolute than relative, but you're looking at two different things. Like 80-20 is really the basis of hypergamy. I shouldn't say. The basis of hypergamy is doubt. Is he the best I can do? That's number one. Number two is just what we were talking about, is 100% of women want the top 20% of guys. Want. Doesn't mean they're getting it. Doesn't mean they can sustain it. It means they would love to have a same night lay, maybe. Hot guy in the phone camp party, right? But that doesn't mean that, like I said before, alphas can outbang, or chads can outbang dads. From an evolutionary perspective, the more sex that those guys are having with those women is like your body, your evolutionary, subroutines don't know that you're putting a condom on, or she's on the pill, or that she can't get pregnant. The only thing that your evolutionary biological imperative is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. If you can get that through porn, or you can get that through abundance with women, makes no difference. It doesn't matter to your hindbrain whether or not the woman becomes impregnated. It's that you had a sexual experience with her. That's why it's so enrapturing. That's why it's so, compulsive for guys. So yeah. Christian Matiko says, do you think young feminists will go more with conservative men aside from the Antifa soy boys? I think, and this actually kind of gets back to what Hassan Haji Muhammad said, like, how do you improve, right? Well, I think that right now what we're seeing, particularly in these protests, I'm going to call them protests, these demonstrations, let's just say, I'll be as neutral as I can. What I'm seeing is a lot of women, and I'm seeing a lot of very feminized guys. The riots are another matter, but the people who are there pulling down statues tend to be white, middle class, well-heeled women and the soy boys that sort of join them because they think that that's their way of getting laid. They think that that's that's the way that, remember we talk about identification game, like beta game is all based on like identifying with the feminine. There it is right there. And the guy who gets up in front of the police guy, he's doing that in front of all the chicks. And if he gets beat up or he gets smacked or he gets pushed back, that to him is sort of sexual capital for a guy like that. So I think that after a while, like maybe that guy, once that guy is proven to be sort of like the soy boy or the beta male kind of guy, I think after a while, maybe, I think things have to get a little bit worse before that happens. Christian, I know that a lot of people were saying the same thing when COVID first came out, like, oh, you need a guy who's stable and is going to have a good job because in the pandemic, we're all, now it's the riots. Now it's the civil unrest. When maybe before women said, screw this guy, I'm going to go start an OnlyFans account. Now, when the wolves are at the door, maybe an OnlyFans account is not what women want to do and they want to have some kind of protection. So I understand the logic. I just don't think we're quite there yet. It might be another 3 or 4 months. God of Orphans says, hi, Rollo. I sent you a question on Patreon. Oh, you did? Okay. I will look at it. I promise. I don't know what it is. I can't really read it right now. Merciless 6 says, in your opinion, if a woman is asked what she brings to the table, what's the best general answer a woman should give to ring his bell? Okay. Well, I've said this before, and I will say this to women. I've written an essay called An Essay for Women, where I talk about how women can add value. The concept of value added. Women don't know that anymore. The only value women have right now to the opposite sex is to be sexy, attractive, and available. You want to know why we're talking about the 80-20 rule today? That's because certainly for the last, let's say 15 years, since the rise of the internet and the new enlightenment and our new data age, women have unprecedented access to whatever the hell that they want. Whether that's, like if they, how many women have, what were the college rates, like college graduation rates? I think it's somewhere like 65 or 70% now of women. Men have dropped out. Women are the ones that are going and getting advanced degrees. Now, of course, what most people will say, well, those are worthless degrees, or they're incurring student debt like crazy and they expect men to pay for it. And those men are completely, like the majority of men are young men, are completely unprepared to help them pay. Why would they have to anyways? But I think there's this social understanding or this belief anyways, that even if women's beta bucks provisioning side of hypergamy isn't 100% met, women believe it is, particularly in the global sexual marketplace. So they believe that, well, I don't have to go with somebody who I'm not attracted to. It's me. I got to follow my heart. Well, funny thing is, your heart tends to follow the guys who are the top 20% guys. Doesn't sound like a follow your heart romantic ideal. It sounds like a biological evolutionary ideal that you've applied some sort of romantic ideal to. That's where it comes from. So yes, I mean, when you're asked, when women say that, like I've said this before, like well, Rich Cooper does this, like he'll run down like just 6 things like women should have if they want to get married or they want to have a successful, healthy relationship. And you will be surprised I would be surprised. Like it's almost like every 3 months or every 6 months, you put that list out again, and a new group of people, a new 1,000, 10,000 people are like outraged that a man would actually have standards. I can't believe he even put it on Twitter. Ban him, dox him, cancel him, put him on the 6 o'clock news. God forbid a man ever have any kind of standard. And most men don't have any standards for women, and they would never dream of saying, I'm not going to go out with a woman who doesn't do these things. So what else is there for women to like show as a sort of value added? Here's the pussy, right? Here's the boobs. Here's my ass on, join my OnlyFans account. Your sexual women know that their real agency with men is their sexuality. That's the only power that they have. And that's a depreciating asset. It decays after a while. I think I wanted to get into talking about the wall, but I think I'm going to save that for a full episode because I'm writing an essay on that, not for the book, for my blog right now, for the Rational Male, which I realize I'm behind right now. I'm going to do, the next one I'm going to do is going to be about the wall and sort of like an updated understanding of the wall, because the last time I wrote about the wall was in book 1 way back in like 2012, 2013. So I'll talk about that again. But the short answer, Merciless 6, is women need to understand that just because they have a sexual agency does not mean they have actual like value. Like, what else is there? Like, I'm kind. I'm a good mother. Like, guys will say, well, she needs to learn how to cook and clean, right? Okay, maybe that's part of it, but there's other things. But women have no insight. They wouldn't even ask themselves that question, and most men wouldn't dare ask a woman, what else do you bring to the table? So what else is there, right? Cherith gave me 100 yen. I don't know what that is. Your thoughts on Indian sexual marketplace? Cherith, I've got a what is it? I've got an essay, Cherith, and since sorry, my friends. Is it the black pill? I don't know if I put it in the black pill thing. I know what it is. It's Cherith. I'm going to refer you. Actually, I have. It's called the Global Sexual Marketplace, right? Yeah. I'm going to dig this up for you really quick because you gave me quite the contribution. It's called the Global Sexual Marketplace, and go look that up. It's on the Rational Male. I wrote it February 27th, 2019. It's called the Global Sexual Marketplace. There's actually a video that's on there. I talk specifically about the Indian sexual marketplace and the Asian sexual marketplace. That's really the best thing I can refer you to right now. And the reason I wrote this, it was because I was sort of exploring the global sexual marketplace, but also because a lot of black pill guys tend to be Indian or Asian, because Indian and Asian women are the most notorious women who do not want to have anything to do with the men of their own ethnicity. And so guys say, I'm doomed. I'm only 5'6". I'll never get a good girl. It's height. Okay, well, look for women who are 5'5", right? Yeah, go look at that. Go check that out. It's called just type in the Global Sexual Marketplace in the search engine on the Rational Male. Here, actually, you know what I'll do? I will copy this and I will put this into the StreamYard chat because I care. All right, there you go. All right. Alex Amour. Thoughts on, can I get up there? Oh, it's that one. I have a big thanks to Sambata today, by the way. I have a lot of good super chats today. Alex Amour says, thoughts on women trying to settle down with the alpha. Instead of trying to find the beta provider, they will try and transform the alpha into the provider. I see this as a tactic used by younger women. Yes, and I also mentioned this earlier, Alex Amour, is that it's not just about women. It's also about guys who will shame those guys into settling down, because that eliminates that competition, that reproductive competition. So it's also a social convention. It's also, well, you should do, if you're not living your life right unless you are settled down. What you're also talking about is, I talked about this earlier, Alex, is the Beauty and the Beast narrative, which is the alpha is the uncontrolled, untamed beast that she wants to have sex with. I haven't brought this up in a long time, so I'm going to bring it up right now. I brought this up maybe a year ago now. When I was publishing my books for the first time, I think it was the second book, actually. When I was publishing the second book, I became aware of a genre of what's called xenoporn. And I was just exploring, like, well, what's hot? Well, what are people selling books on right now? And xenoporn, Xeno pornography, is monster porn, Bigfoot porn, right? Like aliens porn. And it is not written by guys. It is written by women. And the most popular title of xenoporn is Come For Me Bigfoot. Yes, I said that. That book right there. I read some articles about that. The woman who wrote that book, which was the beginning of like a series of books, it's like Bigfoot porn. And it's exactly what you think it is. And it's very popular with women. It's not a guy. I mean, maybe some guys are getting off on it too. I shouldn't say that, but the demographic who is buying it are women. Bigfoot, the beast, right? The beast from Beauty and the Beast. Like, take me, like, do me. We were talking about. Remember, I was doing the 365 DNI episode. I talked about that a little bit too. There's that sort of feralness that women are looking for. Well, why would they be looking for that in 2020? Or, well, it would have been 2012 back then. Oh, the last decade. Why would women be looking for that? The beast. Why would they be looking for the guy who is like 365 DNI? Why would they be looking for 50 Shades of Grey? Well, because the other side of hypergamy is already, at least the belief is that it's already made for them, and they're entitled to the beast. They're entitled to Bigfoot. I can't believe that. I read the article for that, and that woman was making $35,000 a month on that one title alone. And she even said she felt bad. I think eventually she took it off the market, but she said she felt bad about it. She probably has other titles too, but she made so much money off of that, and that like put her on the map. Come for me, Bigfoot. I'm not saying go look that up, but I think it might still be on Amazon. So, well, to answer your very generous question, yeah, that women would very much like that, especially when that guy. You want to know why young women try to do that? Younger women, let's just say, maybe not in the peak demographic, but like younger women, let's say 20. I don't know. Let's say 26, 27. First of all, women, when you get to be about 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there, I think at that point, women start to start thinking, well, you know, my biological clock is ticking. And that's about the time I think that women start thinking about it. Like I've told guys this all the time. Like guys will tell me, like, I'm 36, Rollo. I'm 38. I don't want to get with a party girl because they're just hit it and quit it, right? I'm looking for something serious. I need to find a girl who's going to be a good wife. You want it? My advice is always like, what should I look for? I don't want to get with a girl who has baggage and has a single mom. I don't want to get with her either. I told him, I say, you know what? Look for a woman who's between the ages of 26, 27, and 28. Because that's when women start getting they start seeing things in a different way. The priorities start changing. I'm not saying they don't want to have the alpha sex. They do. But they're trying to lock down that alpha, as you said. So why is that? Well, because women, particularly of that age, believe that they're probably out of college at that point. They might be starting on a career if they're following sort of the Western career path kind of thing. They certainly feel like they're empowered. And that empowerment entails also the assurances anyways, that the beta buck side of things are taken care of. So if she sees a guy or she's dating a guy who's alpha, it seems like the best of both worlds. I already got the beta bucks. I can do it myself. I got my own job. I'm a strong, independent woman, according to feminism. But if I could just get this alpha guy to commit, maybe I'll have his babies on the sly, right? Or how can I lock this guy down? Well, they're interested in that because that is the optimizing hypergamy. Beta buck's already done. Alpha fucks, here he is. That's why. TB88, what role do rigid class structures play in the SMP? They used to play a lot more significant roles. Let's put it that way. I think what you're talking about is, this is what I get from this is what is it? The caste system in India. That's literally where hypergamy came from. The tendency was that women would like to marry out of their caste into a higher caste, right? They don't want to go lower. They want to go higher. Socioeconomically, it makes sense, right? Why wouldn't you? Well, that's how we sort of recognize what hypergamy is. Women don't want to go down. They want to go up. Up in sex, up in money, up in status, up in whatever. How can I do that? Well, you want to know, you know how women go up monetarily? Basically through divorce and inheritance today. You want to know how women who are millionaires, in some cases billionaires, most of them, like 90+% of them made that money in a divorce settlement, or they made it because daddy died and they took over the company. So that's part of that. But like the structure system is a social structure. Well, I mean, that's society emplacing, like, you remember I was just saying about how social orders put buffers on mating strategies. That's part of it. That social strata is also part of that. Eddie Daniels, what did you say? I've met nice law-abiding citizens who have a blind eye. Okay. We all know that if he was a gangsta or a criminal, he would wear an eye patch. It's the fallacy that if a guy is nice, he should have less pride in his appearance. Okay. Maybe so. And Bull Rush says, did I get to Bull Rush? Oh, there he is. Okay. Rollo, do you think Jordan Peterson's views on monogamy are partially to validate his ego investment in his own life choices? Yes. Yes, I do. And people have asked me the same thing about Vox Day. And I like Vox. I still like Vox today. I think he's kind of gone overboard with the religious things, but he didn't used to be that way. And people ask me this about Vox. They'll say, well, what do you think of the sociosexual hierarchy? And I've done a video on that. What do you think of the Sigma male? And nobody cares. You know, it's funny. No one cares about sociosexual. They don't care about the alpha, the beta, the delta, the gamma, the omega. They could give a flying rat's ass about that. You know what they care about? How do I be a Sigma? That's what they say. And it's like, if you watch Vox Day's videos, he never even mentions Sigma. And the reason for that is, like, a lot of people said that they came up with Sigma, or Vox came up with Sigma to validate his own beliefs in himself, or what, like, his own ego investments. Like, I'm a maverick. I'm outside the sociosexual hierarchy. I'm an alpha, but I don't follow anybody's rules. Yeah. So that's why I don't get into categorizations like that. I think those are valuable. Don't get me wrong. I think sociosexual hierarchies are very valuable, for sure. Same mistake that Jordan Peterson makes. Jordan Peterson follows, or I think a lot of his ideology, or the things that, particularly when it comes to like men and women, when it comes to, like, if you talk to him about hypergamy, he will use my definition, my expanded definition. I've heard him use this on Joe Rogan's show. He will talk about hypergamy in almost identical terms as I've used in the past, but he only sticks to the beta buck side of things. Well, women are only interested in guys who are good providers, who are going to be a good bet for the future. No, they want to have sex. And the reason he doesn't go towards the alpha seed side of hypergamy is because he married his one. You know, well, if you know anything about Jordan Peterson's marriage and his girlfriend, when she was his girlfriend, they met each other when he was like 8 years old. And it's like this, you know, puppy love thing that just sort of worked out, right? I don't know the actual total details, but I do know that I think she still has her original last name. I'm not sure she changed her last name, even though he said she was supposed to. I mean, you can see how that family works out and everything else. And I think that sort of the proof is in the pudding with respect to Jordan Peterson. Again, I don't know. There's just something ain't right with that. And I think you're right. I think that a lot of his, particularly views about monogamy, are what he has idealized for himself. And he's realized that to an extent, at least, with his soulmate. And he loves it. And I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm sure I love my wife like dearly, right? I'd be devastated if she had cancer. So I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm just saying that a lot of the ideas that have been put out, like prior to any of this stuff that's going on with his life, certainly had an influence on like what he writes, what he talks about. Absolutely. But he was, it's funny. When he started talking about socially enforced monogamy that one time, and he had to go and explain that on Joe Rogan at one time, I totally understood what he was talking about, but like, I understand how people would take that, particularly like Vice would take socially enforced monogamy. You mean you want to force women to be monogamous with men they don't want? No, dumbass. That is absolutely 100% not what he's saying. He's saying that society enforces a monogamistic, let's say, a monogamy as ideal. Not that, you men, we just need to have like, prearranged marriage. That's not what he said at all. But that's where they go, because binary brainstem, lizard brain. He wants everybody. He wants women. He wants ugly men to be with beautiful women. I can't believe he'd say something like that. So what you're saying is, freaking idiots. Vice are idiots. There, I said it. Sorry. Not sorry. Sally Reeve. What do you want? Sally Reeve. How does solipsism for women compare to mental point of origin for men? Oh boy, God, you guys hit me up with these at the end. Okay, this is the last one. Don't give me any more. I like your money, but I don't. I have to get off. I've talked about this several times. Like people will say, well, isn't just being a make yourself first doesn't make you more solipsistic. Yeah, but when I talk about mental point of origin, I talk about it in terms of enlightened self-interest. So it's not like here's the reason. Solipsism is something that is innate to women's nature. It's innate to their psychology. It was innate to their survival adaptations too. They had to be. Everything had to be about them. They had to be nervous that they were going to get eaten. They had to be nervous about, taking care of children. That's why they formed, social networks so much easier. That's why women are better at communication than men are on different levels. That's all part of solipsism. And I'm not saying solipsism is a bad thing. I'm just saying it is a thing. It can be. It can lead to narcissism for sure, but it's also a survival trait. So solipsistic women took better care of their kids. They were more, okay, it's all about us. We need a guy who's going to be protective, or if we're not, then we got to go find a deep cave, right? I don't know, whatever. They had to be more self-centered and self-focused. And in this society, in a gynocentric social order, it has only exacerbated that. So that's the thing. For mental point of origin for men, on the other hand, is something that men have to learn, or they're taught to unlearn. But it is also something when I talk about mental point of origin, I almost always pair it up with enlightened self-interest, which is I cannot help others, or I cannot help them as well as when I help myself first. So for women, their first thought is about them, usually about themselves, but it is in such a way that it is that nothing else exists outside of themselves. For men, because we're interested in things, because we're idealists, that's the problem, is that we prioritize things outside of ourselves first, and then we think about like ourselves. That's a problem. That's the difference, actually the fundamental difference between those two. And last but not least, So Suave alumni checking in. The site has really gone downhill. Salute you. It's too bad. I think So Suave still has something to contribute, although I would say it's probably been invaded by a new generation of guys who are very, let's just say, nihilistic. All right, guys, that's it for today. If I didn't get to I don't think I didn't, but if I did not get to your super chat, you can email me and I will do my best to answer it for you. I'm going to be on this show tomorrow morning, actually, on my show. I'm going to be talking with John from Modern Life Dating. We're going to be doing it pretty early in the morning. It'll be like 7:30 or 8. So watch for that. It's just going to be a quick hit thing. If you're already subscribing to this channel, you will already get the alerts for it. If not, you can watch it whenever it's convenient for you. We're going to be talking about body language mastery again, and we're going to be talking about the need, Asanji Muhammad was asking for, ways that he can lift himself out of the 80%. That is going to be a key topic tomorrow. So don't miss that. I don't know how long we'll go for, maybe an hour. It won't be a very long show, but we're going to talk about that. He has a new body language mastery thing coming up. I wanted to hit him on that because I am endorsing it once more time, because I think that is a pretty valuable program. I didn't endorse his pandemic pickup because I needed to sort of step back and see what was going on. But when he does body language mastery, I'm always on board with that now because I've watched him do it. So it's a community kind of thing. And then also, John is also part of Rule Zero, and we're going to be doing Rule Zero live in Las Vegas, October 2nd through the 4th. That is coming up. We have a full roster of guys now. I will be putting out collateral for it. Like I've got new logos, I got new headshots, I got a whole new campaign, let's just say, that I'm putting out not this week, but next week. And because we're still finalizing the venue as it is, but it will be in Vegas. It's also the same weekend as EDC, which is Electric Daisy Carnival, which is like this big, gigantic like weekend rave. So there's lots of things to do in Vegas that weekend. I'm really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, I had to cancel my vacation that I was going to take at the middle of July, but I think I'm going to just shift that over to that weekend or that week. So looking forward to that. That'll be fun. If you want to get in on that, tickets are going to be available through the new speakers first, and then old speakers will have a shot at it. I personally have 4 tickets that I can sell. Tickets have gone up. If you're holding a $500 ticket that we were selling back in February, hang on to it. It's good for now twice. You get double your content and double your fun. But if you are new and you want to get in on it, it is at the low price of $9.99. And you can either buy that through me, through Patreon. You have to be a Patreon subscriber. Or if you have, maybe you would want to buy it from Aaron Clary, you can go get it from him, or Sterling Cooper, or John Fitch. And what else do we have? John Fitch, Sterling Cooper, Aaron Clary, Sterling Cooper, John Fitch. And I keep forgetting who the next one is. Maybe that is it. That's more. All right, guys. So anyways, that's it for today. I will catch you guys tomorrow in the morning. And then again on Sunday, I will see you guys here, same time. Bye-bye.